So, welcome everyone. This is the final review of phase 2 Projective Cities students. It's a really important day for them and for the program. It's the end of a 2-year journey, and what a journey this was for that generation of graduates. What we will see today is 5 dissertations from 5 students. Unfortunately, one of them had a personal emergency, so she won't join us, but her colleagues will present her work, so we can give feedback, and TU will see the feedback, and I think it's something that we can do to celebrate her work as well. I think we can also, if you don't mind, we can also record the meeting just to save some of this feedback for reference. So I will start the recording now if you want. If everyone's fine. So as I said, 5 projects, and as you will see, they are all working in very different sites, and it's a work that they develop mostly in the second phase of the program, while the first phase is devoted to a series of other, let's say, design exercises and essays and seminars series. I don't want to say anything more. I just want to thank everyone, the Projective City staff, for their incredible commitment under these incredibly difficult circumstances. And of course, all the students who work. I mean, this generation is truly, heroes of architectural education, and not only studying under these circumstances is really an incredible achievement. I want to welcome the guests, our jurors. We have with us Lawrence Barth, Director of the Housing and Urbanism Program from the AA, Matilde Cassani, who is also teaching in the school, a great friend of ours, Christina Varvia, who was a member of the faculty here, very well known also to all of you from her work with forensic architecture, Fanny Kostourou, colleague from CSM, and of course Ilias Angelis, who is joining us from Mytilene in Greece, and he promised that he's not gonna turn his camera right or left, so we won't see the sea. So we just keep ourselves concentrated in what we are supposed to do. All right. Thank you, everyone. The order of appearance is Clinton, TU, EJ, Tanapol, and Darian. We will keep time. I'm gonna say like 15 minutes. I'm gonna tell you around 14 minutes to wrap it up, okay? And then we have 15, 20 minutes for feedback, all right? Great, thank you, everyone. Clinton, you can start.
Hi everyone, so I will share my screen. Okay. Good morning everyone, I'm Clinton Tediardi. I'd like to present my dissertation, Care Devolution and Inter-Household Cooperation towards a cluster model of common institution of land, care, and dwelling. The dissertation investigates alternative forms of community care in the context of London, which propose neighborhood care model as a spatial framework for the current social care devolution. The dissertation aims to rethink how the change in the current regulatory framework can promote community-led care. In the urban scale, how the proposed model can organize the emerging mutual care initiatives, and typologically how the type organize these modes of collective living. The care provision in London currently still faces some issues regarding the uneven distribution, neglected cases, and managerial barriers. Increasing aging population and diverse community makes the care provider cannot keep up. Moreover, the current hostile environment policy creates some class and racialized care services for vulnerable communities. The dissertation tried to look at care from the vulnerable groups as a subject, where the issues of social care are also based on the inaccessibility towards housing, social exclusion, and precarious living conditions. In 2012, the care decentralization was developed. However, it enables major marketization of the healthcare and managerial issues at local council. In response, a 2017 London Health and Care Devolution was introduced to make better use of public asset, transferring decision-making at local level and integration with the NGOs. Devolution enables community to manage and co-own surplus public assets at local level, which opens up the new question of new care model. And this makes it possible to propose the project as a part of local social care provision within the intersection of the current social care and housing provision. The project proposed collective ownership model by CLT and cooperative system in giving secure, affordable dwelling of the local communities. In this case, care provision goes beyond the health services, where it provides protection and security for the living condition of the vulnerable groups. The dissertation will be divided into 3 chapters based on the elements and the scale of social care through investigation of care provision and exemplary cases of collective care in London. The project proposed alternative spatial conditions and framework for mutual care practices in 3 conditions: co-housing, community care cluster, and high street as an integrated part of the neighborhood care model. Chapter 1. From the genesis of 1980s right to buy, major privatization in London creates the uneven distribution of the current land ownership that often left the vulnerable communities between the pockets of land or even displaced them from their local areas. Along with rapid urbanization, increasing land price in London creates unaffordability as well as precarious living conditions for the minority group. In 2018, Mayor of London proposed small site program, which released surplus public-owned land for the community-led housing purpose. This provision, however, faces difficulties by the community's financial, building the life oversights, and in some cases, to compete with the private party through tender. The first model that redefined this, the care accommodation in the UK is the older women co-housing. Founded 20 years ago, they fought for their co-living with the mission to create neighborhood cluster to reduce health, social care demand, and dependency. In this co-housing, the 26 older women collectively manage and operates based on the mutual support with the additional help of care organization in the neighborhood. The co-housing is developed by using the planned cluster unit of 1 to 3 bedroom while sharing communal facilities. From the first act of getting up, each older woman moves from room, cluster, building, and neighborhood through collectivized domestic activities as inter-household forms of care. The case of older woman co-housing shows that the nature of household and as singular and private entity can be expanded by collectivizing domestic services, exercising property as common ownership, and challenging the predefined structure of nuclear family. I would argue that the history of inter-household care can be traced back from the cooperative housekeeping movement by Melonisa Faye Pierce. The collectivized domestic activity turns into a project of care that represents the movement, the question of domestic labor, gender role, and social structure, which are still present until now. Moving into the design, the condition 1, the elderly co-housing in the Whitechapel High Street neighborhood. The project proposed the conversion of TfL land through London CLT model. The organizational scheme of the co-housing is divided into 3. The cluster where informal forms of care is practiced within elderly women, the building by housing cooperative organization in their daily activities, and the neighborhood where care manager help to organize requests and schedules with the cooperatives. The proposed activities are organized according to collectivization of domestic work, circulation and inter-household relation of caregiving and care receiving. The unit type is developed by organizing basic domestic service as infrastructural modules within the unit, living rights of the room for dwelling purposes. The unit can be developed from 1 to 3 modules, adapting the MPhil system for user to reduce distance mobility, room connection, possible extension, and visual spatial connectivity as their forms of informal care. In the cluster, the unit plans are organized in linear system, sharing larger scale of communal services such as communal kitchen, laundry, vertical circulation, and semi-outdoor space in the balcony. The cluster is developed as duplex, providing the less able body in the first floor and the more active users or carers in the second floor to give supervision. The cluster are replicated with the possibility to produce inter-cluster relation from the common areas. The co-housing is developed through cluster type to rethink how collectivized domesticity can become the basis of care activities between caregiving and care receiving, between the household and clusters, to be exchanged as form of assistance, where interdependency between them set out as their care condition. The co-household condition aims to dismantle the traditional nature of domesticity that construct privacy, gender role, and choreography of the household based on spatial hierarchies and disconnection. Chapter 2. Social care for vulnerables in the capitalist society has always been in twofold crisis: devaluation of the reproductive work and stigmatization of the vulnerables. This goes back to the notion of reproduction, where care is performed as unpaid and effective labor in the family and public institution. Moreover, the basis of welfare can be seen in minimum wages and gender minority carers, set out as a relation in the service industry inherited from British poor law. From institutionalizing modes of living within the context of religion, hygiene, and morality, the state introduced architecture of collective care as both infrastructure and institution in regulating the vulnerable groups. This is seen in the early models such as workhouse, while the later model being the part of privatized service industry in the care homes. This, however, can be seen different in the community care centers such as Bromley Bible Center that came from the struggle of Bangladeshi women community in East London. Bromley Bible Center brings together GP, employment, housing advice, church, and art organization as one-stop care in one of the poorest areas in the UK. Here, the GP deals with the community care and Bangladeshi women learn English and also find a job. In here, care activities are reproduced collectively in providing resiliency in the neighborhood. Condition 2, community care cluster. The project converts NHS land into community care infrastructure that accommodates social care service through cooperation of multiple community-led organizations. The proposed activities are organized to integrate modes of assistance, collective participation, and exchange with the community-led care initiatives as neighborhood social support. The care cluster is developed as series of interconnected pavilions through pilotis system as semi-indoor outdoor space. The proposed program are projected as collective care acts in the forms of spatial framework, which can be exchanged as their co-protocol. Community care cluster is developed as a group form, accommodating collectivized mutual care activities with the aim to produce a common ground, where the cooperation between care collectives and vulnerable communities in terms of care provision and daily management are set providing social care in the neighborhood to reduce the dependency and burden towards primary care. Care as a political interrelation is exercised through adaptation, collectivization, and cooperation, where cluster types should organize unexpected activities, social interrelation, and multi-scalar activities from one's room to the neighborhood. Chapter 3. Social care devolution can be seen in relation with the Welfare 5.0 report by Hilary Cott, in which she described as open and porous, exhibiting a strong relational ethos. Welfare 5.0 institution blurs the boundary between those who are helped and who need help, such as in the community-led care network. And historically, this model can be traced back from Bangladeshi and Middle East population in East London. As the extended household structure is dominant, the pivotal kin between mothers and their daughters is formed by exchanging goods and services. This is replicated in the community events such and rituals. And then the networks of kinship becomes their forms of interdependency that helps them survive during the middle class exodus by council housing development at that time. The pivotal kin model can also be seen in the Hebas women group. As a Bangladeshi community, they organize sets of care activities within multiple spaces and agents for Black, Asian, minority ethnic, and refugee or BAMR women groups. Language difficulties, childcare, and lack of confidence were the most difficult barriers for some of these women, not only in terms of care, but also in terms of life in general. Immigrant women specifically suffers from the lack of capacity and funding support on welfare, access to housing, legal status, employment, and education or training. Facing these barriers, these vulnerable women groups self-organize their activities and network system to fill these professional gaps. I argue that the Heba Women's Project started to challenge the convention of care from its domestic nature through distribution of care labor with different subjects of multiple households. Heba Women's Project is just one of the emerging initiatives of the community-led Heba Women's Project is just one of the emerging initiatives of the community-led care network in Whitechapel. This care collective organized the range of informal care practices in urban enclaves that should be retaught in the proposed neighborhood care model. The community-led care practice exists as a system of interdisciplinary network where the movement between these spaces distribute care through various activities and subjects of the vulnerables. The third condition, Whitechapel High Street, that aims to explore the special intervention of the informal care activities by vulnerable communities in relation with the socio-economic. Furthermore, the project would like to rethink how the public infrastructure can be projected as spatial accommodation of the community-led care network. The element of piloty is used as both spatial and boundary framework that enhance the inside-outside relation while giving freedom of activities and appropriation. Condition 3 try to redefine High Street as a care infrastructure where multiple care agencies and activities are intersected and practiced in socio-economic relation as forms of resilience. The design used two layers of intervention. First, the freestanding piloty structure for sheltering, extended activities, shop house, and space for street vendor. Second, the open street for more flexible activities such as outdoor cafe, food court, and greeneries for the screening of the street. Transformation of the high street typology into care infrastructure enables street as a space of temporary sheltering for the vulnerable subject, as well as enhancing variety of activities between the shop, the piloty, and the open street. The project rethinks street as a space of care that enables protection and participation of the vulnerable communities. The dissertation proposed care neighborhood model as a new mechanism for social care devolution through cluster-type organization of inter-household care across three conditions. Rethinking care as interscalar activities that are fostering the well-being and socio-economic part of the local community. In the end, the dissertation aims not to point out a solution, but to open up the possibility and discussion towards the new model of care that maintains and fosters the local support network as a project towards resilience where care becomes commons. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Clinton. Perfect timing, exactly 15 minutes. So let's open the floor for feedback and questions.
Maybe I will start. So first of all, congratulations, Clinton. I think was very well described, very well taught, and very well presented. I think was quite, the proposal is quite on time, and the pandemic also reflected the fact that elderlies, by being alone, are really losing a lot of energy. So this idea of having the common is very interesting and probably very important, even more so now. I have a question which regards the spaces, actually. So it's very clear to me how the project works and what are the project aims. I wonder which are the special features you added to spaces in terms of space distribution or in terms of types of furniture, let's say the organization of the interiors in your project. If there's something you added in order to perform this idea of care. And
yes, for the organization of the interior of the project. So what I try to develop is the interscalar forms of the cluster itself, whereas it provides this possibility to connect between in the co-housing between this one household and another household that forms this forms of interdependency between them. And in the case of the care cluster, I try to develop this as semi-indoor outdoor space where the exchange of activities of these mutual initiatives can be enhanced. Yes.
I can follow maybe. Thank you, Clinton. I thought it was also a really beautiful presentation, and I'm very much with you, politically speaking, in terms of the project you're setting out. I think for me, my main question would be, I guess there's where do you expect to find opposition when trying to do this work, right? Like how do you expect there will be moments of resistance when you're trying to convince several stages of planning, of government, et cetera, to adopt your plan? And I'm asking this because I think what would be, let's say, beneficial to see maybe you have it and it wasn't in the presentation, but a little bit more of what went wrong last time we had a welfare state and why we kind of drifted so far from it into this privatized way of dealing with that sort of infrastructure. And so I think if a little, I would ask you maybe to clarify a little bit of your critique of what happened then and how your project somehow takes that into consideration when proposing care anew. And finally, I think it will be useful for me to understand, maybe, I don't know if you have one, but to give a definition of care, because I think the word care is so big in your project. And I'm completely with you in terms of I use care in many ways, in the way that I speak and kind of politically the way that I would promote notions of care. But I think it's quite important to tell us what you mean by it, or is it kind of an umbrella concept that then gets broken down into all of those bits? How do you define care, and what role does it take in the relationship between the denizens of a place and the government that is responsible for managing space, whether it's local government or national, whatever that is? Sorry, that was a long question, but great to hear you.
Maybe I'll start with the first one about your question on this, maybe the inheritance or the critique on the welfare state itself. So I'd like to think like social care or social care in the welfare state is envisioned or like is practiced as a service industry, in which I felt because after this post-war period, they need this mass production of healthcare or social care for these victims. They provides this standardized and service industry where care itself is a professionalized, and I felt like in which I see from this the context of the local communities that are emerging right now, care goes and this goes to my definition of care itself. I try to look care as forms of interdependency, as a forms where these collectives or communities goes beyond the question of health. It becomes this socio-economic resiliency that they can depend on, and this produce daily, and maybe sometimes this is not cannot be seen as a social care, because the pre-definition of social care itself still goes back to this idea of service of giving the subject. But I would like to rethink this idea of caregiving and care receiving as this exchange between these collectives.
Okay, I have a follow-up, but maybe wait until other people.
Can I follow up on Christina? Hi, Clinton. First of all, I have to say it was a really beautiful project, and well done for that. It was also very visually appealing, but also a lot of things that made us, have this conversation now. Following up on Christina's, actually, one of the points of Christina's about the definition of care was one of the points that I had in mind. But since you tried to reply, it made me wonder. So you define care, let's say, as you said, form of interdependency and socioeconomic resilience. And to me, I would like the question I had is you structure it in 3, let's say, chapters. Throughout, you are talking about different social groups. So you talk about migrants, you talk about elderly, you talk about Bangladeshi women, and so on, within the context of Whitechapel, which I think is quite interesting as a context within London. So I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more about how your project actually managed to bring together and create these forms of interdependency among all these groups that you are talking about, and in what ways the architectural forms and typologies you have proposed, like the linear pilates or the cluster typology, can actually nurture care across all these kind of groups rather than within a group itself, but in a way kind of manage to do this interdependency that you've defined as a form of care. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's very challenging question, because I felt there is this difficulty on how, because when I went to Whitechapel itself, it's a very, very diverse communities, and in which my approach was first to take a look at this the communities that I can find easier, and the one that are very present historically and currently active, in which I try to approach this Bangladeshi communities. So from there, I try to look at this, how they practice this care as this social interdependency and also resilience, in which they try to fill this professional gap. So what they do is they try to look at this professional gap that they cannot find from the local council. So I try to look at these types of community and forms of provision that can provide it. So in terms of activities, I try to approach from that. And but on spatially and typologically, in these three sets of conditions, I try to look at this idea of the cluster itself. So how this the grouping or collectivization of these communities across different activities of housing, socioeconomic, and also care practices can be provided. So what I try to achieve in these 3 sets of condition is how this spatial or structural framework can be changed, can be adapted, but also can provide this these forms of care exchange.
So there is an interaction between them, that
So
with the elderly, with the Bangladeshi woman.
Yes, so they are within this neighborhood care model. So what I try to propose is this, the neighborhood care model, in which these three conditions can exist together, can coexist one another. From this, the transformation of this public assets, in which I try to propose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lawrence or Aurelia?
Yes, you know, there's so much to talk about, Clinton, and you know, the field that you've opened up is something that I can imagine you could go on researching for another couple of decades as things evolve. You know, it's not the sort of project where you kind of get to the end of it and go, okay, well, that's done. It's the sort of project that it kind of invites us to keep on thinking what exactly is changing, not only in the care environment, but in the, as you point out, the urbanity of care. And I think, in a way, starting with this idea that there is some kind of reason that we would want to look at a reconsideration of the neighborhood as a space of care, where there's some sort of meaning to the idea that a neighborhood and care are interrelated. Now, of course, in one sense, that's always been part of the neighborhood. That is, that there's a sort of sense of certain institutions within the neighborhood become part of our civic life in meaningful ways, you know, traditionally the school and so on. Now, there's another, but if we combine that with something that I think is happening in the care system, you know, we used to sort of say, if there's a neighborhood facility that is associated with care, it would kind of be the clinic. You know, of course, we all know there are hospitals and there are doctors' surgeries, but the sort of, the idea of the clinic and its sort of location within a neighborhood, that was part of a system of a care model where government would provide for recipients that were treated in some sense as being almost a bit neutral. When something goes wrong, you go to the care environment. Now, one of the things that I think is happening because of the shift in our understanding of health and well-being is that we've all become molecularized. I mean, the nature of research is such that we go into the very inner workings of our genetic selves, our pharmacological selves. You know, each person is sort of taken apart down to the molecular level. And the result of this kind of shift in our understanding of care is that we become ever more personalized. So the idea of the personalized subject of care becomes hugely significant. And so today we have about 1 million choices of how we're going to seek therapy, everything from art therapy to sports therapy to genetic screening to new approaches to drug therapies and on and on and on and on. Now, it's almost impossible to imagine that any one institution can take care of all of that, right? And in some respects, this is part of why there's so much pressure on the NHS. So now let's say what we really want to do is to give greater democracy to that. And we start to ask the question, well, how do new institutions start to participate in a more democratic way? And I think that's what you're really looking for. But what I think, in a way, you might want to take forward as you look at this as a 30-year project rather than just a thesis that's done and dusted, is that to my thinking, you didn't focus a lot on the changing nature of care as a practice, given this incredible proliferation of therapies. So now if there is art therapy, and if there is sports therapy, and if there is genetic screening, and all of these things start to become part not only of a neighborhood, but of a specific sort of building, how does that building become a piece of neighborhood life because of the changing patterns of care? And how does care, in a sense, change the typology that you would be looking at, such that these sorts of offerings can be part of rethinking of the building as such, not just as a collection of spaces that sort of get added up and organized, but what sort of pattern of care is associated with this changing approach to the individual within a social environment. And so I think it's, you've opened up something that's so huge and rich, and I think being able to take that forward. The question I think you want to ask yourself in this new environment is, how would you assess something that is better or worse within the new scheme? So to me, a lot of what you were showing was kind of like an illustration of an idea that is still based in some respects on an old model. There is a recipient of care. And I think in a way, what's actually going to change is that we will become more and more actors in our own care models. And so, the matrix by which we understand what we want in our well-being, that's conceivably going to lead to a new way of trying to assess what makes a successful care environment.
Thank you.
Ilya, you're muted. Do you want to say a few words and then we can move on to the next?
I'm afraid I have a big problem because any kind of a critical dissertation on the welfare state, or especially the UK model or Swedish model, I'm extremely interested in. But I throughout the presentation, I see your mouths moving, but I have no sound. I have long interruptions of blank, no sound. So I haven't been able to hear it. I don't hear you. I mean, I hear you talking, say certain things, and then there are gaps. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Perfectly.
So I missed on something that would normally interest me enormously. I hope I keep on getting this dialog box. Your internet connection is unsafe, whatever that means. I hope that doesn't last, or I hope it can be corrected. For the time being, consider me absent. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Okay, no worries. So we move to the next person.
Move on, yeah, and I'll try to see whether I can. Whether this changes, because I don't think there's anything I can do.
Yeah, just check if when you're muted, if you're also muting your head, your
Yeah, I didn't mute myself, so it went into mute, so I don't know. Now I'll keep an eye on this.
Great. Yes. No worries. Are there any last comments? Christina, you want to say a few words?
One last, just what I wanted to follow up on also from the conversation is, I guess for me, what would be really interesting is to hear a little bit of how, beyond kind of the design of those spaces, how you plan to counter this huge force, which is the force of capitalism that turns public infrastructure into an individual business that is commercialized and sold to the people of Whitechapel or whatever context, right? And in London, it is the dominant force. So I think the question of the financialization of the project, but also the political position of the project, and articulating how you would be able to transform what has once been a welfare state, then dragged into a really long history of of really like hollowing out the city, bringing in capital, making buildings empty and pushing out people to the side, how you rearrange that value, considering that there are a lot of people that will resist that, and considering that the financial kind of part is at the heart of it, because all of a sudden London is not about the people who live in it, but it's more about a commodity that gets created through property. So I think that it's beyond, and I guess beyond the kind of the funding of the project, which is one way to think about it. Beyond that, it's a question of values, and it's a question of how do you transform a whole system that tries to individualize us and kind of open up those collective kind of strands more. And I think then it becomes a question of, when you talk about care, is it the sort of kind of therapy type of care that Lawrence was talking about, or are you talking about care also as a way of living together in a more abstract way? I think those things would be it would be really useful to refine them. Are you talking specifically about kind of the medical and mental healthcare, etc., or are you talking about just kind of sharing the burdens of living together? That's up to you to respond, right? Just that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fanny, you wanted to add something?
Yes, because I actually find out that you still have 1 week that you can perhaps do some last tweaks. And I was wondering whether I can perhaps propose that you spend some of this week on bringing the different fragments, not that they are so fragmented, but the different bits of the work together, and kind of look back and say whether your response actually responds to the research questions you had at the beginning, or the hypothesis you set for yourself, and in a way try to conclude on, try to see literally and reflect on how the different care-based or propositions that you have around care and around different definitions of forms of care tap into the political aspect of the project, the social aspect of the project, the organizational, or if you like, institutional aspect of the project, whether that is even like the connection with NHS, and the economic. And I think if you try to reflect it this way, then it will all make sense. And you will, in a way, instead of just presenting it as chapters, you will try to find the common thread that will bring all the pieces together. And theoretically also reflect on the propositions, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And really, congratulations, Clinton. I mean, it's really a fantastic piece of work. And I think all the comments were really, really helping you to update and work on the last bits for the next week or so. I would like now to move to TU's presentation. TU has a personal emergency and she cannot be with us today. So Darian will present her work. And, you know, if she's seeing us, just want to say hi and wishing her all the best, and big hug from us from London. All right. Darian, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours for TU's presentation. You are muted if you want.
Okay, yes, sorry. I think that you can see my screen.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so I mean, first off, Shiu, if you see us, hello. We miss you here today, and we hope that you get well soon and that everything is good. Or more or less, like, she asked me if I could present her work and wanted me to let you know that there are missing parts and pieces within the presentation that are missing. But since you cannot be with us today, I will go one-to-one through this document. And moreover, must say that I'm honored to present the work of such a fascinating colleague and researcher as Shiu. And if you see this, I hope that we can laugh about me stumbling through your notes very soon together. With any further ado, Site as a Battleground, Xiushin. This dissertation studied the industry of construction and tries to evoke critical but long forgotten issues. Starting from a broader scope, the dissertation launches the research from a global perspective and then specifically focuses on Chinese context. It reveals battles between the workers and capital on construction site, and finally aims to offer worker dynamic forms of collective equipments empowering the workers. The construction industry is a field that requires the synthesis of a diverse range of inputs. Nowadays, global capitalism has expanded the scope and scale of the building industry to form an expansive supply chain, a vast network of manufacturers, suppliers, and builders whose operation are aided by digital technologies and facilitated by transportation systems connecting most regions of the world. Construction as a process is essential for the city, yet one of its most crucial factors, the construction site, where knowledge and ideas are realized, has long been neglected in formal architectural studies. The recurrent presence of construction sites and the questions they raise in relation to labor, architecture, and urban fabric have seldom been considered as a formal element of urbanization, and this has resulted in a lack of formal investigation of these elements in architectural discourse. This dissertation tries to investigate these neglected questions by combining global perspectives and the specific context of contemporary China, revealing new insights into the group of construction workers, especially for the working and living conditions on construction sites. Moreover, it provides an exploratory study to assess the issue of labor, construction protocols, on-site working, living matters, as well as care for the workers. Construction workers in China consists mainly of migrant workers. Millions of migrant workers are working and living in large and small construction sites across the country. For such a long time, they have long been subordinated and often exploited by the construction industry sector, driven by the capitalist economy. For research subjects like them, TikTok is a good way to trace their daily lives on construction site in different places. This unique form of investigation, made during the time when the world is experiencing a pandemic, are achieved using new technologies and media forms through which we can gain a much clearer understanding of the everyday situation on smaller and larger construction sites in China. The dissertation interviewed 3 migrant workers in China, talked to them, and recorded their day-to-day practice based on the video they posted on TikTok, and several incredible stories have thus been portrayed vividly. Meanwhile, the online and physical questionnaire survey to those construction workers who are undertaking different crafts also helped me narrow down many complicated research questions and gain a better understanding of workers' genuine situation, attitude, and thoughts in relation to working and living matters on site. Although in recent years, responding to pressure, the central government has provided certain top-down rules to force the industry to put into practice certain measures to improve the dire situation of construction workers on site, the risky working environment, chaotic living situations, and passive position of the worker, as well as the rigid structure of the industry, still made the worker in the construction industry the most vulnerable. Based on all of these ideas, this dissertation argues that the governmental and state-owned enterprises, as well as developers and construction contractors, who possesses the strongest power, sufficient resources, and abilities, must be obliged to protect the underprivileged workers. It is not enough to oblige the government and top-down policies to command the construction groups only to treat their workers better. The dissertation explores many other parallel forms of both bottom-up and collaborative mechanisms necessary to ensure not only safety and welfare of workers on site, but further opportunities and collective resources in terms of skill exchange and transfer, education and family support, community forming, productive relations with the city prior to and after the duration of an active site. By doing this, more layers have been added to the critique on labor, and at the same time extends the study of labor of reproduction, care, domestic, self-building, apprenticeship, sustainability, and many other social relations. As a territorial demonstration of power, the construction site can be interpreted as a temporary territorial equipment. Within the specific space, different forms of productive forces, activities, tools, and devices form the equipment projecting the power of labor. Gradually, the way of developing a construction site has been developed into a particular form of planning a site. The building and planning processes, which require certain schemes and protocols based on the time and construction work of a project, give the construction site a distinct spatial character and developing patterns, making the construction site a unique type in the architectural discourse. Critical insights arising from the analysis of current situations in turn provide the basis of a series of design propositions exploring the testing possible new forms of collective equipment for workers. These new agenda and values contribute to new strategic relations between the industry, the city, and the communities, intersecting by activities on site. The project emphasizes temporality, taking the dynamic nature of construction as a driver and associating different programs, actors, and subjectivities in the integrated design compounds. Within such a framework, new social, political, as well as architectural agendas will be invented, and more alternative modes of living will also be generated for the workers. Most importantly, the design project is envisaged as a process in itself in relation to implementation, participations, and anticipated variations, rather than a direct solution for the matter of construction in the urban context. The reinvention of collective equipments is indeed the most challenging question to this work. The notion of collective equipment comes from Foucault, Deleuze, and Guattari's philosophical model for the city, the equipment of power. Learning from the previous cases of collective equipment made for workers, including the Workers' Club from Soviet Union, McApay made by Cedric Price, and House for Migrant Workers in Temporary China, this project tries to challenge the design from three aspects, including modularity, temporality, and forms of collective living for workers. Collective equipment for workers, historical, contemporary, and now. Investigation on the realistic environment raises an opportunity to understand more details of things that happen on sites. From home to the city, side to side, migrant workers are always living in a nomadic life under enormous uncertainties. In a way, that's how they become subordinated and dominated by capitalist economy. Therefore, the design gives them a prefabricated unit, a permanent house which can be shipped from side to side, but offers workers a comfortable living environment and a sense of belonging and the feeling of having a home. Because of their unique skills, construction workers pose many building crafts, and they use them to build their own furniture and inhabit the space they work and live in. Here you can see a slide of self-built furniture. Therefore, the design creates a synthesis system consisting of three parts: the fixed cell, living units, and self-built furniture, to give workers space and opportunities to decide how to work and live on the sites. Designs are tested in three sites, which have multiple scales, different locations, and building aims. Based on that, the program, spatial organization, and proposition of each testing are varied from each other. One small scale arrayed on the periphery on the site, the second one middle scale on site group close to the project, and three large scale service clusters separating from construction sites. The design in different sites aims to offer them a more flexible and dynamic structure and space for workers, so they can use their self-built crafts to occupy, separating, and furnishing the space. On a large scale, a group consisting of three parts of structure: blue functional space, which contains toilets, baths, and circulation and kitchen; the red living area, which can constantly be self-defined and redefined; and purple areas are made for collective use. To look deep into the first design testing, the development pattern allows the same rule. The blue space can be implemented first and then follows the rest of the parts, and they can be easily modified, installed, and dismantled according to the needs and numbers of workers that the project requires. There are tons of ways to occupy and furnish the inner living units and the units for both offices and collectively used space. This is the first floor plan, extract of the first floor, living units and the ground floor units, living units and an adaptation of the interior and partitioning walls, ground floor units and alternatives how it can be occupied. Section, another section, insights into the dormitory, and insights into the functional space where bath and rest space are, and these are situations that are captured within the breaking period of the workers. Insights into the shared spaces for collective use, connecting the city and with the site and the site with the city, such as a studying space inside of its architecture. To conclude, the design tests across 3 cities in China proposed structures, agendas, programs, and schemes that are all explored as applied in different scales, location, and forms. This exploration presents new ways to live collectively on the construction site that provides workers with much better accommodation, a more comfortable environment, and power regarding how they live on the site, and to counter the dominance of certain parties in the capitalist economy. The interventions are not direct solutions for dealing with the housing shortage and the lack of resources and knowledge for deploying a construction site, but it reveals possibilities for a deeper understanding of construction and the construction site. From the architect's point of view, such a radical experiment, which uses professionals' knowledge and skills to address workers' problems and rights, brings distinct on-site working and living conditions within the jurisdiction of design project. It also uses the architect's position to help guide housing decisions from design and construction to logistics and implementation, rather than making workers live in a particular way decided by capital. Although the design project contributes to new insights for both the architectural discourse and the Chinese construction industry, the designs are still contained by many flaws and deficiencies. They have nonetheless managed to focus people's attention on the specific issue of labor, construction, and the site, and commodified subjects, and this is a good starting point that will encourage further attempts and discussions in terms of both theoretical studies and design projects. End of Shiu's notes.
Thank you, Darian. Thank you. Yeah, let's open the floor for congratulations to GU and really sending you your best. Let's follow the same protocol. Let's just give feedback, I guess, in the form of comments for GU, and then I think she will take them on board, working on the final submission. All right, thank you, everyone.
Well, one would like to have to be able to ask certain questions, clarifications, because it's very, very interesting. Very interesting proposal on the relationship of workers, capital, labor, the vulnerable situation of a worker. But one of the questions is this concept of collective living on the construction site. And one would like to know about this as an issue. Is this something that is normally happening in China, or is this a proposal for the workers to actually live on site, because I mean, it definitely is something that is open to exploitation. If the worker is actually lives and is made also to live collectively on the construction site. I mean, it's a big question.
If I may, I mean, that's an extremely important question. If I may just attempt to answer, these are studies of existing construction sites. So this is something that happens extensively in China and in a very, very, very dangerous and precarious condition. So the project somehow intervenes from the side of the workers, not to improve the life conditions, but actually to change them fundamentally. So that's the premise of the project. I mean, we can of course discuss it further if that's something that is desirable or not, if it can be done differently or not. But it's something that it's happening quite a lot and in a very, very bad
Really,
way.
Really. I mean, it's unbelievable if that really is happening.
I can follow up maybe. I think also congratulations was really beautiful presentation and quite sharp in its reading and really important as well. So well done. I think also the methodology of, in fact, speaking to people through those platforms that are easily accessible was really brilliant. I really enjoyed the kind of the real texture of the lives that they present themselves, right? It's their own voice and their own agency in those platforms. So I really enjoyed that part of the research as well. And I think that question of the construction site as a battleground, almost the way that you present it as a site that is political but is never considered as such, I think is really strong. I agree. I was also I've seen some of those living conditions, and I was also feeling a little bit like, okay, if we start intervening in that space, then we're somehow almost complicit with it, because it is wrong fundamentally, right? But at the same time, I think there's something quite strong about talking about the fact that, first of all, because it is so precarious, it becomes toxic to even touch. But in fact, it is necessary for us to look at those conditions, because there's such a huge population living in the margins, and we consider it as the people who have almost kind of fallen out of the biopolitical infrastructure of the state, and therefore somehow it's unfortunate, right? But actually seeing the margins as something that is temporary, that is permanent instead of temporary, right? That is by design, and actually taking a hard look and talking about how we could improve that even by a little bit. I know that it would make a huge difference. So I admire kind of also the bravery of going into it, knowing that whatever one does will, on the one hand, be too utopic, because anything more than the bare minimum, that will not kind of will not make sense in a model where people are just pushed to the bare minimum. That, you know, if they could live in a cardboard box, that's what the kind of capitalist economy would have them do. And at the same time, it's not enough, because people deserve proper treatment, proper rights, proper living conditions. I have many thoughts. I have one of my students last year did this beautiful project in China about the population that came after the one-child policy, which is essentially the second children that when parents didn't have the money to pay the fine, they would be undocumented. So it means that they didn't have an ID, and all of those people would be the migrant workers that went into cities like Shenzhen and built it up. And so there's also kind of this sort of structural way of taking people's rights away. And then it is that kind of that same population, which is I think 6.9 million people, who actually have no rights, which means no votes, which means no healthcare, which means no power to advocate for themselves. So this is, I'm saying this because I think, just going back to the first formulation that was proposed, that the site, the construction site, is in fact a political space. That all workplaces are political spaces, in a way that we could think about organizing any sorts of kind of industrial action, strikes, et cetera, but also as a place where people gather and people with similar conditions are able to talk to each other. So I think that is actually, you know, I'm following also that logic that the project's not finished in a week from now, but in fact, I would be really excited to see how it is possible to activate the construction site as a political space where we could actually consider those relations. Anyway, it was a very long comment, but I'm very appreciative of the project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can go on, starting from Christina's thoughts. I agree that the construction site could be considered a political tool, and as such, I was wondering. Well, first of all, congratulations, because it's an extremely interesting project and extremely well developed. I have a question / comment which regards probably these last days you could go on with your work, and following this idea of the construction site as a political tool. I was wondering how long these settlements for you could last within the construction site. So how temporary, how permanent are they? And maybe I should work a little bit on the narrative around it and understand what's going to happen during the construction and after the construction is completed. So will they move elsewhere? Will they stay there? How these settlements will develop throughout the construction period?
Thank you. We keep it as a question for Chiyu when she sees the video. I think that's a very important question.
Well, presumably they take their little box with them and move with it to another site, one assumes.
I think there were very beautiful studies that Chiyu did for this question of temporality. So it's not just that these units can be taken elsewhere or they can be owned by their inhabitants somehow, but there was an idea of these perimeters, especially becoming interfaces. So they stay in the project basically, right? So they create a type of social collective infrastructure for the city in this, whatever this means. I mean, it's something that she was exploring for quite a long time. So that's a very important question: the phasing during and after the construction.
Look, it's again, you know, as Christine is saying, it is something that that extends so with tentacles into the future and into the surrounding space in exciting ways. And Chiyu and Daria, and I have to congratulate you on your sort of seamless way of working together. It's a testimony to the whole program that you know each other's work so well. Look, there's so many different ways we could look at this. On the one hand, there's something, highly specific about this, the way in which migrant workers are exploited in the construction industry in certain parts of the world as part of a larger problem of geopolitical inequalities. And then there's also the question of, the kind of challenges of building new sorts of institutions that can contest the dominant decision-making patterns in ways that have been so undemocratic. But Another way that we might begin to look at this thesis is that what's being described is a condition of extreme mobility. And this question of mobility is something that I think has become wider and more pervasive. All of us are, in a sense, on the move. And the way in which we might use this almost as a starting point to rethink this overlap between institutions of urbanity and successful institutions for the cultivation of rights, even though we're on the move, because in many respects we associate rights so strongly with our location and our identity, and we kind of tie those two things together. But maybe there are other ways of starting to conceive of rights of dwelling as a kind of participation, even though mobile, in a series of opportunities to improve and change one's lives. So I think one of the things that was interesting to me was, there was a moment where it was kind of suggesting study and education could become important. And the three figures, they were all 26 years old. So let's say, what's the time frame? As we start to look at a question of our attachment to a mobile existence, do we stop being mobile when we hit 30 or 35, or does mobility in some sense continue, but our life chances improve? And what then is the role of this learning and this engagement with the city? And does this change our understanding of that collective equipment? So, again, a little bit like the last one, in some ways, the model is still one of a kind of provision of something better for each individual, while nevertheless the story is one of collective change. But I don't quite understand yet, what is that collective change? Do individuals start to leave the migrant situation and become settled, or as they go, do they become more engaged with the cities in which they move to, and so on? There's I think some intermediary questions about the nature of that institutional formation in a mobile world.
Thank you, Lawrence. I don't know, Ilya, Fanny, anything to add?
I can. I don't know if it. Okay, maybe I just go first and then I leave it for Leo. Yes. So again, really congratulations to both the author and the presenter. I think that was quite a nice performance. So congratulations to both, but also I once again, very, very interesting topic. For me, all these kind of questions and the fact that it is basically, we talk about modern slavery in the 21st century, and all these kind of things that we find across the world it's quite astonishing. And what we can do as architects and practitioners is really important. So well done for raising such a hard topic. I think I have a lot of questions, but and some things were a bit fast for me, so I'm not sure I grasped 100% all of it. But one perhaps proposition that I have for the remaining of the time is going back and revisit some of the research questions, because to me it is really interesting that we try. Like, as I remember, there were 4 categories, like the engraved hierarchy, the division of labor and the workforce, and and so on and so forth. And it would be nice to go back and revisit and whether these research questions are still applicable to the project, or they can be reframed in a way that the project actually does justice by them. So I think, first of all, one of the conversations one of the research research questions could be about the mobility and mobility injustice that Lawrence just raised, and how we thinking of construction workers as a mobile group, and the kind of rights, but also the kind of possibilities and the kind of freedom they have to move around, and what does that mean for living collectively, as you said, which again make that kind of combination. Again, of course, about the architecture and live to collective. So in a way, if the focus is about living collectively within construction site for construction workers, which are migrant and which are mobile and who might not have their full rights, and they cannot enact on them, then understand what are, in a way, the research question formed around that. What makes living collective possible, and how can architecture accommodate these various aspects to it? So I think, trying to bridging the kind of the project outcomes with the research question. But overall, I think it was very well ambitious and well presented process. So well done, both.
Perhaps a very quick note that I would add in relation to Kiyu's exploration of temporalities, multiple forms of temporalities on site, is that she had very specific attention on the timeline of different tasks on the site, and she made sure that there are more correlation and overlaps with the short stay workers and the one that stay for more construction work or more heavy work. So in a way, a layer of those collective forms of living in a way was entangled into interaction and giving a base to the one that comes for 2 days and go away, basically just to, I don't know, put a filler, or I don't know, to put a paint on the wall, or screw the knobs. So in a way, there are multiple times and let's say temporalities within her proposal, which is very much, let's say, commendable, if you like, but they are not. I mean, and also at the same time, she never wants to solve the problem. So it's in a way, it's let's say raising the problem as most of the Cretes brought it up, and also trying to find a way between, let's say, various forms of conflicts that exist on the site to find the more humane and possibilities of a collective formation, and leaving the rest for the workers to represent themselves by their means.
It's a problem, Hamed. It's a problem that cannot be solved, that we cannot do anything about it. And one thing that one can do is expose it. And I think that she does that brilliantly. Because really it is, quite an amazing exposure. It is really slave labor, a capitalist slave labor in a country like China that uses the most sophisticated capitalist techniques.
Oh, exactly. Brilliant work.
Yes, really brilliant work. I don't know, anyone from we have 2 more minutes. Anyone else from the Projective City staff, if you want to add a sentence or something for Chiyu and her work, would be really nice before moving to Yijay.
Yeah, I'd like to say just a couple of things. Thank you all for really excellent comments. And Chiyu is actually been very much aware of this, the exposure mechanism that the project could bring in the Chinese context. But there's also something I just want to add as a footnote, just the understanding of the context is this rigid registration structure. So in order to become a resident in an urban context in China is strictly regulated. And these cities are built, these, let's say, migrant workers that build city, they're often denied of any possibilities to become the residents of the city that they built. And I think it has been the case for decades and exacerbated as well. And I think there is actually now, because of a new demand of a new link between the rural regions and the urban regions, there are some initiatives from the government to try to reform the registration system, which means that Chi's proposition actually may become very useful in some ways, even from the point of view of the government, because what they could say is that there is, let's say, a possible procedure of if the workers do contribute to the construction, contribute to the collective of offering services to the city. So they could fix things, they could build things, they could cook, they could, etc. And also the families that they bring, also there's parts of regional, let's say, crafts, etc. that could be offered back to the city. And the city needs a lot of repair. So there's a lot of buildings that's been built rapidly 30 years ago that actually need significant input. So you'll see in the next project, I think it's quite a nice, it's a continuation of that interrogation of the Chinese cities as it was and as it is now. So what Cheese is proposing is that the workers can earn their registration or earn their rights to the city by demonstrating the services not only towards the site, but also towards the city. And I think that possibility of exposure also offers them a bit of a political representation. So these kind of peripheral intervention becomes the staging of their service to the city rather than something that's behind the fence. And I just want to point that out as a quite remarkable decision that she has made. But thank
It's
you.
a very important question to know where do they live? Because the impression one does get when, as a visitor to Chinese cities, is that the inhabitants of those cities are families with one car for every member of the family. You know, creating gigantic traffic jams in and out of those cities. I mean, that's the superficial impression that the visitor gets when one visits those Chinese cities.
One reference that could be interesting here for the student, if they want to look at it for the final, I don't know, probably you have talked about it, the work of Contra Condutas and the slavery in Sao Paulo and the Brazil when the construction of Terminal 3 of the international airport was happening. And actually their work is amazing on exposing the conditions of living of the workers. Which basically they were trapped in the building, like prisoned for a month to kind of not being able to live. And again, it was, they were falling on the crack between the developer and the state and how the financial agreement was happening between them. And could be very interesting as a kind of a parallel or almost a case study and how to draw some kind of perhaps relevant links between the two.
Amazing, Fanny, really important
also
reference. Yeah, Joanna, of course. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see familiar faces. So if I may add something, having seen some of TU's previous presentations, I think she was also quite concerned and commenting with what Elia said on exposure of the relevance before making the world aware of the problem, making these people, these workers, aware of some of the rights they can claim and empowering them in pursuing them, because many of these workers are like generations who have been raised and trained within this system, and therefore they haven't really been given a framework of really a framework of empowerment, even in this small scale that concerns their living typologies or further their labor rights. So I think she was also approaching this from this point of view, focusing on these workers and then exposing the problem to the world. But thank you all for your comments. I'm afraid I have to leave soon, but it's been great to see the work of the students so far, and I will catch up later on the recording. Thank you, everyone, and and
Thank
see
you, Anna.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi, Leah. Hi.
Thank you.
I just wanted to
Yes,
also
Christina.
like to say congratulations to Kiyu, and also thank her for like the journey and the learnings of this kind of situations that sometimes it's difficult to know it from kind of a European context. And I would definitely encourage her also to try to continue this discussion also in the Chinese context as in the way it could be possible, no? Just kind of also trying to bring the work that he has done here to the place. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Let's move to Yijie, okay? Great. And after her presentation and feedback, we can take a 5-minute break for a coffee. I would offer you coffees from the AA bar, but let's keep this, let's be optimistic for next year.
Okay, so I will share my screen now. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Yijie Zhang. Today I will introduce my dissertation, Inclusive and Incremental Renovation. This dissertation is concerned with the future and redevelopment mode of large-scale housing with low quality in the urban area. The old public housing in Shanghai has been taken as the research target. The dissertation is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the research of old public housing to understand the motivity and the limitation of renovation. The second part focuses on the 3 different perspectives of renovation and promotes a relative renovation strategy. The final part is a pilot project to test the feasibility of the proposition. Emergency and decline. Old public housing is public housing sold or leased to residents after the economic reform in 1978 in China. They are low-cost and rapid-built housing located in the inner city to solve the housing needs after World War II. Around 2000, with the large-scale demolition and relocation project, some of them has been replaced by commercial centers, office buildings, and high-end commercial housing. This redevelopment mode, while bringing about huge economic growth, has also led to a huge imbalance between urban and suburban. Also, although the relocation costs get financial compensation, the huge price difference and the location of housing replacements do drive people to the suburb. This has caused the residents to raise considerable objections to the social claim brought by the demolition. Under this urban condition, this dissertation challenged the tendency to demolition old public housing. I will argue that instead of demolition, renovation can be a more moderate development mode without social claims that benefit both citizens and residents. The research arm is to propose an alternative renovation strategy as a people-centered development mode for old public housing to improve the living conditions there. Repetitive and impermeable. 6 cases in different locations has been selected to understand the general condition of old public housing. A bunch of old public housing isolated by the fence and wall has been called 小区. They are the neighborhood with a clear boundary and the political unit government by the residential committee. The in-between space of the building is usually greenery and access, and the building plan in each case also has a lot in common. Unlike highly repetitive housing, under the privatization of housing and the drive for the free market, the community has a complex demographics with multiple generations. Today, the difference in daily routine and living habits cause a great social division. The planning of housing is no longer suited to today's residents. How to improve renovation without large-scale relocation has become the force to the study. Renovation and participatory discussion. In fact, both residents and the government have tried to respond to the contradiction between increasing needs and housing decline. However, the government-led large-scale renovation project afford due to a lack of funds and ignorance of residents' needs. And at the same time, resident-led small-scale renovations were considered illegal due to a lack of safety and provision. Finally, both sides point to a new model of renovation, participatory renovation. Participatory renovation is proposed by expertise of designers, architects, and sociologists. Those three parties work as mediators between government and residents to enhance social coherence through small-scale regeneration. As present, those organizations do not have the strength to renovate all the old public housing because they are so small. Therefore, it is necessary to establish a collaboration renovation agency. This agency works by providing an efficiently operating system and establishing a communication platform for the renovation work. The renovation agency is based on the optimization and integration of existing renovation forces. Through the consolidation of resources, the agency can provide a broader range of more professional renovation services. Transition phase of renovation agency plan to spend 10 years on good communication with residents and serving the site to get those housing ready to renovation. Renovation and well-being. As housing price rise, the affordability of old public housing guarantee the rights of low and even middle-income people to live in urban area. For the citizens, a housing in an urban area equals good transportation with job opportunities and public institutions. Therefore, old public housing has become a target for them in their pursuit of well-being. However, the old public housing with the poor living condition do not equal with well-being. Interviews with residents revealed that the lack of identity and neighborhood relationship affected the well-being of residents more than the distress caused by the decline of facilities. This is because the communal space there is greenery and roads without any public service. This functional empty space has built two boundaries between the living unit and the city. In the case of Weifang Third community, due to the lack of facilities in the areas, residents are forced to carry out their activities outside the community. Today, this type of housing, with its high degree of repetition and the great lack of functionalities, has become a tool to reduce the opportunities for communication between residents. Therefore, the old public housing needs a transformation not only about the requirement of existing facilities, but also include the addition of functions within the community. The objective of the renovation is to exchange more space for a minimum cost of demolition. Through extension, addition, and transformation, more available space is sought, and the distribution of circulation and functional space in the area is reshaped. As a top-down strategy, these strategies are developed by the renovation agency in consultation with the governments after the survey and assessment of the site. The renovation minimized the impact on residents' lives. So the transformation work has been separated into several short-time quick-build projects. The duration of each project has kept to less than 2 weeks and did not require the residents to move their belongings. Renovation and social provision. Social provisions are shared facilities that serve a general sense of community. It aims to build social relationships and to access additional services. The social provision is not a dedicated and a singular space for social, but a facility with several designable functions. The social part is achieved as a supplement to the designable function. In some of the cases that already exist, residents has renovated part of their homes into social provision. In the case of Miss Lee's chess room, this chess room not only bring income to her, but also let her making friends with neighborhoods who love chess. by sharing occupation and transforming. Renovation activities challenge the permanency and the monofunction of space. Moreover, those spaces are used efficiently at different times through the establishment of schedules. The variety of extra services and the overlapping space use increase the communication between different groups. Therefore, residents living in different units, buildings, and xiaoqus have a chance to meet each other. As a result, they tend to break both social and spatial boundaries. The broken happened in unit and xiaoqu levels. So here, the autonomy and flexibility of the renovation has been emphasized. The residents can use only communicates built by the residents themselves. The proposition of alternative space in multi-scale, providing residents with efficient and safe machinery for renovation. Through addition, expansion and transformation, those social provision be inserted into xiaoqu in small, middle, and large scale. To ensure the variability of social provision, a flexible structure was provided for multiple use, bearing cell, access cell, prefabricated building components, and movable furniture, allowing residents change to time. Except for the functions, the boundary of social provisions can be changed by renting or buying. This flexible structure has been impacted to 3 levels. Unit level serve for residents living the floor. Building level serve for residents living in this building. And the xiaoqu level serve for residents in xiaoqu and outside xiaoqu. The negotiation process of this alternative system is essential to ensure a smooth communication process for residents. Once residents give the proposal, the residents' meeting will be held monthly to discuss it. By creating a database, updating the service content and building components for renovation according to the changing needs happened periodically. Design experiment. To test the feasibility of the above proposition, the simulation of top-down and the bottom-up discussion derived from the site research interview of government and the residents. According to the site research, this 2-story housing meets extension, addition, and transformation criteria. To conserve the ground floor into social provision, the renovation agency will compensate the residents. At the same time, a lift will be added by addition and the source corridor will be increased by extension. To understand residents' idea and bring them into the design discussion, the research includes an interview with each family and the 2 design meetings with volunteers. Finally, the information has collected as followed. Here is the second floor transformed according to the residents' idea. And this is the section of the pilot project. In conclusion, the dissertation does not provide a specific solution for a particular neighborhood, but rather propose a general renovation mechanism for old public housing. The aim is to critique and challenge the permanence of housings in the current urban condition. The dissertation seeks to envision a flexible and open housing system through incremental and inclusive renovation. As an individual project for MPhil, the spatial study of the old public housing was not sufficient to cover the variety of site conditions. Improving this part of research required the combined efforts for more volunteers. So there is still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very clear and perfect with time. Who wants to start?
Perhaps I can go first. Ije, I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly. Well done. Congratulations. Great. Once again, one of the most, since quite a few years now, pertinent questions: demolition or refurbishment or renovation or adaptation, call it however you like. I think it's very interesting to tap a little bit more into the literature behind it, rather than just to say very kind of from the beginning, demolition is bad, refurbishment is good. The why this is such a big question is because it is quite blurred, the ground. The work of Unpower in LSE, or Crawford and the team in UCL, they have done excellent work on demolition versus refurbishment, and understanding whether, like, from multiple perspectives, it makes sense. And I think it would be really nice at least you acknowledge all these kind of issues from an energy point of view: health, well-being, social and community building, and structural engineering, economics. There's such a it's not such a simple task. And I have to congratulate you, because I think it was very rich, or almost ethnographic type of research that you have done. I don't know if you were based in Shanghai and you could collect. Yes, it kind of shows, and it kind of really shows this kind of rich and really in-depth research. So this is really like understanding the residents, who leases out to whom and why, and all these kind of relations, almost like an ecosystem rather than just a building, but also talking about the residents. It is quite valuable as a research. So already that is a contribution. So that is very well done. I would say, apart from understanding a little bit of the literature and contextualize your research on that, and a little bit, if you can perhaps develop more about the typology of public housing in Shanghai, and why there is value, apart from the communities that already exist there, why there is value for heritage conservation, history, blah, 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 so many things, to actually maintain and refurbish and renovate some of these typologies in the places that they are, in the various, as you showed in the map, could be also an interesting addition. And the last comment, I think, is it would be really nice to, although you understand there are limitations because it's contextual study, as you said, you only have one side. I think if you look at the work of Lacaton Vassal and how with one study they make a case, I think what you can argue is that, okay, there is a limitation, this is pretty contextual, but this can work as a test bed or as a test type that all other public or similar cases in Shanghai or in other Chinese cities could, use that example. And the thing is how you can extract it as a model rather than site specific. So because you have the 3 steps, but for me, it's not clear, like if you can bring a diagram, let's say, or bring all the kind of the model in terms of almost like a recipe, if I am allowed to use that word, that, the state in together with an organization, housing corporation, whatever, or as you said, the community of residents would like to apply that model, how would that, recipe work out? And I think if you have that, how the multiple stakeholders come together, at which point, for which, capacity and so on, I think it would be really useful to kind of bring everything together. But overall, well done.
Thank you.
Katon, because I have to go in a few minutes.
Yeah. You have to go, please.
Break, maybe I'll jump in here. But I think the really interesting thing that you're describing about something that can be bottom up in this way has to do with the building of an institution of local decision making. And coming back to what Doreen was emphasizing in her comments after the last presentation, I think what Doreen said was that the proposition begins to define a way out of a problem for government. And I'd like to put this in a context of a couple of different stories. One is like, you know, when everybody in sort of the West reads Jane Jacobs' Death and Life of Great American Cities. And one reading of that is, you know, planners and government, they're kind of stupid. Look what they missed out on when they didn't pay attention to the local actors' ability to renovate a neighborhood. But another way of looking at that story that isn't explored is that actually one of those neighborhoods did know how to renovate their area, and they fought for it very hard, and in a sense created the institutions of successful neighborhood redevelopment internally. The other one didn't, and so consequently was torn down, and not very effectively, which then becomes a problem for government. Now I remember being actually not far from your site over a period of 3 years in the early 2000s when Housing and Urbanism was looking at exactly the kind of thing that you're looking at. And I remember we asked a group of residents, you know, what do you think about the fact that your housing is going to be torn down? And one of them answered, said, well, you know, we just don't know. And so my colleague at the time, he thought, oh, okay, you're just being careful because you don't want anybody to hear you say something negative about government. He says, no, it's not it. We're not worried about government. He says, but we just don't know. He says, all our lives, we've been told that if we listen to somebody else, the right decision will be made. Now suddenly we're being asked, but we don't know, you know, in a way what the choices are and what might come about. Now that, in a sense, is a problem for government. So I think one of the things that you're describing is a way of using architecture. And I think, you know, Fanny's point, you know, like using architecture awareness from up across the field. What are we learning about this? And then I think, as you said in your awareness of the one limitation, you know, the thing that I think is also really important in this is some sense of neighborhood, the formation of neighborhood institutions, local decision making, the significance of that within the context of the city's broader claim over the transformation of the area. So transformation is going to take place. But to what degree can local institutions help that be done in such a way that new things don't destroy good communities, but in fact can be absorbed within that? So I think you're right, that next step is quite essential. But what I think you've shown is really a fabulous groundwork and an absolutely incredible degree in terms of the shift in thinking over these 20 years since we were there, that this could really be a legitimate possibility. And, you know, interestingly, you know, in Russia, the same kinds of questions are emerging around the Khrushchevsky, again, you know, the 5-story public housing buildings, and the question of should they all just be torn down, and a lot of people saying no, we really like them. And so then the question of on what grounds do we like them, do we retain them, adapt them, and how is that part of a local decision making and the development of more effective institutions of self-governance? I think it becomes really, really essential. So it's a beautiful project, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you. What you mentioned is also what I really want to say, is that when I'm talking with the residents, we can find many situations like someone don't have any idea for it, and some government just helps make the idea for them, something like that. And this is also what I want to do for my in my dissertation, is to provide them both top-down and bottom-up system, so that on the one hand, the government able to help them to do some of the decision, but on the other hand, the residents still have their own mobility and flexibility to ask for what they need. And also with those renovation agency, I think the first step actually is not go inside and to tell them to do this is my plan, but to spend what I say is transitions phase, to spend maybe more than 10 years to teach those residents, to let them know that you can really renovate your living space. You can do it by yourself. And so I think this is maybe this step even is more important than what the architecture's activity.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really a fantastic problem, fantastic starting point. Thanks. Platon, I'm going to duck out, but I'll
yeah. See you later. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you, Lawrence. Thank you.
So I will just add a comment to this beautiful project of yours. I think most of the things were already said, but what I can say is that, as Fanny was saying, it's very important, I think, if you could add somehow a part in which describe the procedure of getting to the final result. So a sort of diagram of stakeholders and the roles of everyone into the project, and also in terms of steps, in terms of timing. I would really like create a sort of Gantt, or like a sort of let's say procedure through the final result, so that it's also it becomes a sort of policy. It becomes something like very feasible, and also a series of steps that could be followed. So I would do that also for the finals now.
Yeah,
I agree. That's a very important point, because I also think it was a brilliant study and a very, very strong argument. Especially, of course, when the stock is really in bad condition, there are good reasons for demolishing, but in principle, the argument is really very strong. But this question of showing the procedure, in a way, is a kind of point of refinement, because I think the case study that you showed, to me, was not clear what was the transformation. I mean, when it was not clear what the conversion had been. I mean, what was the original condition, and what was the result? It was not an example that actually demonstrated the strength of the argument. It could.
I think because maybe I spent less picture to show the original condition of the housing what I want to address. And I think the original condition of the housing is that like most of the large-scale housing built after World War II, they are almost built at the same time and same way, and quick build, low quality, something like that. And
right.
So their lack of the lack of difference, something like that. So this situation maybe at that time is really helpful, because they need to quick solve the housing demands after World War II. But now the people living in those places totally changed, and this kind of housing condition full of repetition actually lets the residents live their lack of social relationship, because they are kind of only living in those housing, and there are no communal space for them, so that they have no chance to communicate with each other, something like that. So I think based on this, I think that of course, the renovation is the what I want to say is that people able to not only change, reshape this housing themselves, but also increase the using renovation as a tool to increase their social relationship, to let them meet each other. And this is what.
No, I totally agree with you. And the argument.
Yeah.
What I was saying was that it was not clear to me what the change had been, what the transformation was.
Okay. So basically, actually, I'm not giving a specific transformation answer. I think I just give some proposition, like you can add something, transform some space, and expansion some structure, and then the residents or the government themselves can discuss the transformation by themselves, but not.
Again, I agree with you. But basically, what I was saying, let's say that I wasn't able to see what the original condition was. How it, anyway, it's a small point.
But I think, Yijie, if I may add something.
Yeah.
I think there is a very clear strategy, which is the addition of this balcony in front of the existing structure. Now, this is not part of the negotiation. This thing goes in front. Now, there are multiple ways that you can occupy it and close it, leave it as a semi-indoor, outdoor space. But so the negotiation happens within a framework, let's say. But that's not only something that, and that's one of the key interventions. There are other ones as well. So I think what Ilya is pointing out, you have to be able to say that's the framework in a way, and that's what can happen within it.
Yes.
Because it's not, right?
Yeah.
So, which it is there. it is 100% there, but you just have to articulate.
Yeah, it's a brilliant piece of work. There's no question. In Shanghai, is it?
Yes. In Shanghai.
Was the impression, again, for a visitor, is that Shanghai seems to be a kind of a cosmopolitan city that doesn't. It's hard to find these places, But in the French concession, in particular, it's hard to find the typology that you mentioned.
Just to add a very little comment, because I think everything has been articulated already, and also from my side, congratulations, it's a beautiful project. I agree that the only thing I was missing was a little bit of clarity in terms of the roles that everyone takes. The renovation agency, what is the role of that? Like, just to articulate that more. And maybe just a small point of caution when you say that the residents themselves can determine what sort of renovation tactics they use, how the space gets transformed. I think that's great, but just a question of just to be careful of not offloading all of the responsibility and the labor to the people who are living there, just because it feels like this is just another thing they have to take care of. And to do a whole renovation on your own, anyone who has a full-time job knows that this is just a full-time job, and kids, for example, that's impossible to do. So just to maybe it's a question of understanding, like, what do you propose in terms of what is the support that people take to do that actually? Is it only financial support? You say training, but that also kind of requires time to be invested in it. And finally, I guess, where do you see, if you use that term at all, but where do you see the role of the designer? Are you proposing that the designer is distributed now between the renovation agency and the inhabitants of those buildings, and someone who advises in between? Or where does the designer exist, or does that get kind of scraped off, no longer necessary? Like, how do you actually use, if that term is useful at all, how do you use that term, and how do you kind of actually suggest that this becomes a redistribution of the term design, let's say, because I think that it's quite interesting. You're kind of thinking how that whole process comes about.
Yeah. I will firstly ask about the first question is like the residents, they may don't have time and money to do this, something like that. And this is also what I want to mention is that I think the renovation strategy, what I proposed is that the professional renovation agency are able to help them to do those renovation, help them to make help the resident to make the renovation become more easier. Like they already prepare a lot of building components, movable facilities, so that once residents want to have some proposal, they can just tell the designers something like that. And so like I would want the guest room or something, care room like that. And then the designer can help them to do this. Not just the residents to do everything for themselves, because it's too waste of time and cost. So that everything will be much easier for the residents, but still they have their own words for those projects. And then like I mentioned, that now the designer, they still existing in this project. They are not telling the residents like you lack of this, you need this. They just help the residents to make the space, make those facilities much safe or great, something like that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, KJ, for this amazing presentation. Shall we take a 5-minute break and then we regroup for Tana Paul's presentation, okay? See you, everyone, in 5 minutes. Thank you. Ηλία, εντάξει όλα?
Ναι.
Μια χαρά δουλεύει, σου κάνω...
Έφτιαξε μετά από το πρώτο,
έφτιαξε,
δεν ξέρω τι συνέβη και τα φάνε όλα.
bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Thanapon. Okay, I could get started. Today, I would like to present to you the final stage of my dissertation. It's named From Commodification to Cooperation, Architecture of Trading and Form of Social Solidarity Network in Bangkok. The dissertation starts from the interest in food vendors in Bangkok, which lead to the study of the issue of food trading in Siam since mid-19th century. It steps forward to explore the typology of market hall, which is an architecture that organizes commercial and logistic activities. The thesis then proposed a research by design project that facilitate an operation of the life of the small-scale vendors, agricultural cooperative, urban community, and their network. It's structured into 5 chapters, beginning with Chapter 1, a historical study of trading and the transformation of urban space and its architecture since colonial period. Chapter 2 will investigate the genealogy of market hall in Bangkok, developed since the end of 19th century. Chapter 3 is an in-depth study of the operation of vendors and their everyday practice, ending with the design proposal of an archetypal unit. In Chapter 4, it explores the organization of cooperatives and the existing solidarity network, which will lead to Chapter 5, which is a design of a spatial reinvention of the market typology applied to the sites in Bangkok. Chapter 1, this chapter is a tracing of a Bangkok's spatial development, its economic consequence of free trades, which lead to the contemporary issue of food trading. The city of Bangkok was one among the others, the center of trading activities since 17th century. In 1855, Siam signed a treaty with firstly the UK and then many other colonial empires, which brought about a shift in economic system from feudalism to the capitalist free trading. This is when the paradigm of the production of the city and architecture has changed from traditionally celebrating a divine of the monarchs and religious to the space that facilitate trading activities. Since Siam was not formally colonized, the local autocrat King Rama V, who is this gentleman in the black shirt, played an active role as a country's governor himself, complying with the colonial rule of free trade brought about by the British Empire. He started a project to transform the city and the entire territories to support the new economic system through privatization of land, construction of logistic infrastructure, and the transformation of urban space. Since mid-19th century, the cities was expanded with an influx of the foreign traders, majorly Chinese immigrants. The authority of the modern state Siam managed to systematically control over the increase of population by means of ethnic segregation. The Siam government constructed many streets and canals for supporting transportation, while also being an agency for police troops surveillance. The apparatus of colonial free trade system influenced the exploitation of labor and resource, or a commodity. This also has an impact on the transformation of the food supply chain system, with the income of middleman trader and private food trading company, who dominate the entire supply chain. After 1960s, the project for country's economic development brought about by the technological development of crops production, which influenced the new type of logistic architecture that supports a large-scale wholesale producers, while the small-scale producers are struggle to operate in this system. This raises the major problem. The current food distribution system of Bangkok evolved from the Southeast Asian colonial free trade economy, has suppressed the agricultural producers into mere mechanism within a complex supply chain. The research aims to facilitate an alternative food distribution system through the operation of cooperative producers in the nearby territory of Bangkok, The project recognized the cooperative solidarity network, who could be an agency to challenge the typological formal apparatus and go beyond the current standardization. In chapter 2, as I described, is the study of the space of trades. It's exclusively about the market hall, which I would argue that it is a biopolitical apparatus of control over trading activities. Colonialism brought about two new architectural typology, the shop house, which is the most common building type in Bangkok, which is a combination of trading and living space. It is constructed to accommodate an influx of Chinese immigrants during that time. Took the model from Singapore, the neighboring colonial city, with an adaptation to local know-how and construction material. It has a characteristic of a generic empty room without any determined furniture. So this genericness allowed the space to be appropriated by the users and be repeatable for cost effective. The first market hall, which is constructed in 1899, apart from the aim to regulate and legitimate all the informal vendors for taxation, this project was also a tool to govern over the body of the traders and buyers. For instance, the stall suggests that they have to stand up while exchanging, not lying on the floor as they usually do. This also raises another problem. The model of market hall in Bangkok prioritized the protocol of hygiene and order without taking into consideration of operation of vendors and their everyday life practice. Sorry. Although they have developed since 19th century, they still hold the same generic character as an equal distribution of infrastructure. This standard model disregards the specific operation of vendors. Learning from the international case studies, the design of the market should concern the operation of the trader that is specific to the type of the products. For example, the position of the livestock store in food made ratio is segregated with the vegetable area, the middle one, which require less maintenance. Moving to chapter 3 will be the research on the operation of vendors and the proposing design of stall. This is the current standard of stall by the Bangkok Authority. This is relatively small and not at all concern the possible activities happen inside. By doing ethnographic research on the type of stall, visiting and interviewing with the vendors, and view that the space is used differently between different type of vendors, which is not at all generic. For example, in a vegetable stall, there is a required space for cold storage, processing area, which is required for peeling, cutting, and packaging, as well as a space for normal everyday activities like eating, for example. These activities can be expressed through the use of furniture and is instrumental to the design of the new standard. The design proposed a frame that demarcates the stall, which could be appropriated by the vendors. The proposition widened the corridor and stall, so it is large enough for the essential furniture. The model could be funded by the market building fund by the municipality. Chapter 4, Solidarity Network. The thesis recognized the cooperative's practice as a new agency to the creation of market space, offering the platform for the current cooperative solidarity network who worked separately in the same neighborhood to be able to operate together. I would argue that by bringing multiple cooperatives in the same space, it could create a direct and indirect mutual benefit. For example, by bringing market hall to other cooperative activities could have helped attract more customers, ultimately create cultural and economic exchange between different groups. The model proposed a collaboration between cooperatives who manage and funding the project, and they could start a negotiation with the municipality to help funding the part of the market building. Three sites are selected to test a design in the suburban area. It is selected based on the possibility of the collaboration between the cooperative organization in the surrounding area and the urban cooperatives. Its location connects well with the productive landscape. The project will be an interface with the surrounding agricultural cooperative around the urban area. In the Klongjan community, which will be the site for the project, I was working with the community, studied their socio-economic activities, as well as the problem of the lack of basic welfare and leisure space, which will become a ground for the framework of the project. This chapter, cooperative communal infrastructure, is an unpack of the design. So the site is selected based on the connectivity with Klongjan Cooperative and other social service organization operates in the area. The particular site has a great connection with the community service, which will be beneficial to the community as it could serve their whole daily activities. The project proposed a condensation of programs, including markets and other cooperative welfare facilities around the courtyard, which will be used as a loading area in the morning and be communal space in the afternoon. The activities of the trading, distributing, and bargaining by farmers and traders normally be hidden away, will be exposed to the urban consumer. The project contains two main structures, the wide span structure for the market and the narrow span for the social service building. The condensation of program is beneficial to the cultural and social exchange. However, this program could potentially disrupt each other's. So the strategy of architectural element could be applied to alleviate the problem. For instance, the space that open to the public is highly penetrable, while a more private functions will be layered to allow more privacy. So the project tries not to exceed the scale of the fabric. The design is a response to the cultural and leisure activities that already take place in the sites. For example, the implementation of the courtyard is a response to the lack of public gathering space, which could support a large-scale events. The market and logistical area in the courtyards is pushed toward the west and east for the connectivity of the streets, while the social service building and community garden is connected well with the existing pedestrian route. In the market hall, each area is indicated for the specific types of products, dividing wet area from dry area, cooked product from raw products. In the cooperative social service building, which contains an assembly hall, daycare, childcare, office, and educational facilities, the design used the circulation space to create a potential meeting place between different groups to enhance a collectivity in the projects. The roof structure is designed to be prefabricated with steel structure that is cheap and easy to build with local know-how, funding by the municipality and managed by the cooperatives. The project allows for the different activities to take place during a day, while the market is designed to have both permanent area and temporary area, which is flexible so that it could facilitate change in activities. The courtyard could turn into a sport field after the market closed, then be used as a communal space for invite street vendors from outside in the evening. This is the scene in the morning market and the communal kitchen on the right. The ground is paved with stamped concrete for the purpose of both durability and friendliness of the pedestrian. The ventilated block, as you see, the red hatch, screen the care center from the courtyards. As I said, the strategy of the architectural elements. The project is designed to be a system of network that is replicable to other communities. In this part, I will show the implementation of different strategy into urban conditions. One is in Tung Song Hong community, a high density housing area, and Rom Cloud community where is less dense. The system of modular roof is applicable to the various fabric and form of the sites. The three projects are an attempt to respond to the different condition and possibility of each site. in a high density area where there is a limitation of space. The area is severely lacked of space for gathering. So the design organized as a linear form to fit to the fabric and be the frame of the communal activities. The cluster type is situated in low-dense housing project, where each program are scattered on the central existing street, turning the street to be the part of the project. The project overall intends to turn the market hall, an architecture that conventionally functions for economic activities, to be able to support a communal form of life. It intended to claim for the right care and well-being of the vendors and the surrounding neighborhood. The project acts as an interface between the rural and the urban, the producers and the consumers, the public and the cooperatives. It will initiate negotiation and be the part of the discussion of the production of the market architecture in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanapo. Great. Thank you so much. Who wants to start?
Start by a question. Thank you so much. I think it's a very interesting topic, and of course, the idea of evolved market is super interesting. I have a question regarding that maybe you could explore for the last days you have for the final, which is about the management of this place. I wonder, how do you imagine this place to be managed? Somehow both during the day, so how the calendar is managed, how the hours are managed throughout the day in terms of moving furniture, in terms of performative things happening in the pavilion, in the markets, as well as during a longer period, such as a yearly period. I think this is a question you didn't explore in the presentation and should maybe be added to your final presentation. In general, I find it a very ambitious and very interesting project, but I feel that if you wanna make it like realistic and complete, you should pose yourself this question.
Yes, of course. You mentioned about the longer period. I lost a bit on that. So.
I think you should respond to how the building or like the market is managed during the day, so from 9 to 6 or the 24 hours, but also the 12 months of the year. So both yearly and hourly.
Yes, okay.
Do you have a response on that, or you prefer to think about it?
Yeah, I already actually have that comment already, like from last presentation, and now I am like thinking about and imagining about the activities that could happen. So there is a design response that this space should be filled with the furniture that is movable easily and can occupy on a certain time, like the market in the morning, and then remove, putting some chairs and turning into the assembly hall and stuff. And the yearly as well, which could be like facilitate the annual events, like religious events and celebratory events for the community. I guess your question is about the how the cooperative would done that, right? Yeah, which I think I should maybe further explore on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like imagining moving a lot of furniture away. Is there a storage? Like first of all, like in terms of layout. Second, in terms of management at the administrative level.
Yeah. There is a storage that like would facilitate these all furniture that will be moved in and out. Yeah.
I can follow up with a couple of questions also. Thank you for the presentation. I think this this kind of conceptual move from the commodification to the cooperation is quite successful, and I think it's really hopeful and great to think about how this could actually restructure the ways that we're thinking about those markets. And I guess my question is, where do you expect would be any friction? What would hold this plan back? And how do you then how does then your project address that, right? Because it feels yes, of course, like a great idea. It should be working as a cooperative. But I guess what I'm not so clear about, maybe I missed it, maybe it wasn't well articulated in the presentation, is why doesn't that happen already, right? Like what's holding us back, and how are you, dealing with this, both in the particular site that you've chosen as a case study, but as you say, also trying to replicate that. Like, what is it that you expect will be the biggest difficulty that the project will come across?
I think the most difficult thing about this project is how these organizations, which already exist, work together, because they are quite fragmented and they quite work individually from each other. And bringing them together, like the authority to talk to the cooperative and each cooperative to talk with each other, I think that would be the hardest part to the project, which I aim to like being the project to be at the center of this and create and raise the discussion based on the project.
So how, please explain, like how does that happen in the project? How does that kind of conversation that's not already happening will happen in the project?
What did you mean? Sorry.
How are you creating the conditions for this conversation to happen if it's not already?
Oh yeah. I think my project is respond to these various users, various cooperative. So there is a multiple program design that respond to a different user. Like the care cooperative would needed some program, and the agricultural cooperative and the OTOP, which is the craftsman cooperative, they do the craftsmanship work, would be like bringing them together. And so the project would be argued as a condensation, as bringing them together could be beneficial for them. And each program needs to be like negotiated after that in this project. Yeah.
Okay, so you imagine that site as an interface or a forum that people come in and discuss. And yeah, I mean, I guess it'll be nice to see how, maybe even designing the schedule of conversations or the protocols of those conversations, because I think it's, for me, that kind of part lacks a little bit of clarity in terms of, it's a great idea. It just, the pragmatics of it is what will make or break it, I guess. Anyway, I think just kind of thinking about like, how do you design that conversation as well, because that will be quite key. And and maybe also, I also want to understand a little bit how you use the term biopolitical in this circumstance. Your chapter 2. 3.
Yeah. So as in my argument, the standardization of the market building and the market stall in the Bangkok regulation is somehow like governed over the body of the traders. So they have to perform in a certain way. They have to clean the market at a certain time, every day, every week, which is like very, very precise and controlling practice, which is not like at all exist before this establishment of the Siam government. Yeah.
Okay, so it's mainly a bipolitical regime in terms of the bodies of the workers, not as the marketplace offering, kind of managing the nutrition of a population as a whole.
Oh, no, not that big scope. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Perhaps I can follow up after Christina's points. First of all, Temple, thank you very much for your project and your presentation, which I thought was very, clear, well-paced, and kind of taking us through different scales one by one. So well done for that. Also, it's a very interesting project, well documented. There are also very beautiful, so well done for everything. Perhaps my question and perhaps focus would be more on the theoretical framework on the project and how you bring together notions such like the different scales, as well as things like networks and infrastructures and these kind of things. I would invite you perhaps to think of the notion of infrastructure, which you cover in the last chapter, beyond the physical one, beyond just the physical infrastructure and the material one, but also all the infrastructural conditions that may support the activity of traders and their life, including immaterial conditions, including ecological conditions, including things like unionization of traders and labor, the determinacy they have, like as a profession, thinking about regulations and how they affect their activities, but also thinking of how do they support networks of suppliers, as you provided the productive landscape of communities, and so on and so forth. And to this kind of tenancy, very important, which I don't think you touch upon, like ownership, ownership of land, tenancy agreement, and all this kind of, which might add a level of precariousness to them. And again, what is their empowerment, which I think it has to do very much with the land they occupy. But I think one way of, and perhaps you can come at the end to kind of bring again all these chapters and multiple scales together. One way of addressing this would be to see that as almost an ecological system. Theoretically, that would be that you acknowledge that within the ecological system, there are, of course, the physical spaces, they are the people, which you have profiled and you have done research. There are the resources that they, all type of resources, as you can, think of, but also the relations between all these things. And again, this is where perhaps you can identify what Christina was saying about the frictions and conflicts. So by trying to see that as the system, ecological system of all those things and their relations, you might be able to identify better where conflicts arise, where frictions arise, and where all this kind of, again, the suggestion by like all these conversations and protocols of conversation might be able to design them. So I think that might be could be a proposition that you might want to come for develop the rest of the week, so that you try to bring all these things together and kind of extrapolate and in a way reflect on the proposition that you started at the beginning, with all these kind of ideas. So that would be my 2 cents. But overall, great work and well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from Projective City staff and students? No? All right. Thank you very much, Tanapo. It was a great presentation. Let's move to the last one. Ilya, do you want to add something?
Sorry, I missed it. I mean, I went out to have a quick lunch and I missed most of it.
Great. Okay. No worries. Let's move to the last one. Lawrence is back. Nice to have you with us again. Darian, the floor is, the screen is yours, maybe. That's the best way.
Cool.
Yes.
Great. I mean, before I start, hello. Also, this is Shadi, Elza, and Johannes. Super nice that you guys are here. And I wanted to hijack these forever on YouTube kind of presentations for a second by dedicating the presentation to my family, especially to my parents, Azadeh and Titos, to my sister, to my wider family for the support which allowed me to arrive to the AA, Kaveh, Elahe, Mandana, and Amir, and everyone else of the clan. To all of my friends, super happy to see the three of you here, but in specific to Johannes, who started the journey of this thesis with me last summer when we were roaming around Berlin and Brandenburg while sleeping in super shitty tents for around about 3 weeks. And secondly, to my partner in crime, Elsa, with whom the journey of this thesis ended. Thank you for the endless discussions and your support, which had a significant impact on this document. Okay, now. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Darian Knoblauch, and today I want to present to you my dissertation, Kristall, the Domestication of Water. Kristall uses water as its vehicle to interrogate abject forms of urbanism, to uncover the techno-human assemblage that structures our territories, urban environments, homes, and bodies. It investigates into the emergence of the bathroom within the global north as a built repercussion of body culture through a series of case studies which reveal its spatial and social implications in search of new living models today. I will present this work via two mediums. First, through the thesis book, through which I will flicker as a work in progress document, and secondly, through its architecture. I will use the book format of the dissertation in order to give an insight into my methodology, aims and objectives, and further on through a series of case studies, which forms a grand narrative that synthesizes the research and will absolutely fly through its ideas, so just let it wash over you. Before I conclude this presentation by introducing you into Kristall 4, one out of 4 designs which I will explain in depth, to portray how architecture is used in order to synthesize the research into a product of design. Methodology. The thesis is structured by 3 acts: productive narcissism, seduction machines, and intimate aliens. Each act is structured through 4 subdivisions in which 9 architectural case studies trace the domestication of water through a specific lens, while each act concludes through a design proposition deriving from the evidence that it has gathered. Introduction. The domestication of water is an emblematic product of modernity and reveals quantum leaps forward in engineering and mass production, manifested in the repressed and seclusive power structures that are inscribed into space. Productive narcissism, seduction machines, and intimate aliens set the stage for 3 explicit research paths that relate water through a reading of self-design, infrastructure, and domestic living models to the restroom by pairing contemporary readings of pop cultural media with archival conduct of historic case studies. For today, I will take 1 out of each of the 4 case studies from each chapter in order to introduce you into the theoretical framework. Chapter 1. Productive narcissism portrays the bathroom as a stage through which the human body constructs and further on fetishizes the civic self and declares the bathroom of the global north as a liminal space which only finds its importance through the sign values of its objects that it is adjacent with. It crosses Baudrillard's system of objects and translocates this reading to the morning routine of Patrick Bateman within the movie American Psycho, in which characters are described through objects that they own. From here, Baudrillard's sign value is further used to interrogate into the spatial repercussion of the bourgeoisie figure and is further on explored by putting into question what the modern narcissus could consist of when finding its reflection within the mirror image of a pool of water, more precisely by understanding water as an object of the self. The perroquet, which left off into the Seine in Paris for the first time in 1861, allowed the bourgeoisie to get privately into contact with water in order to wash off their bodies, by heating it in a kettle before it was detached, filled with bodily liquids back into the river. The circulation pattern of the bathing boat is organized according to sex by 2 landings, A and B, through which the user could enter the male or female part of the bathing boat. The chapter further continues by giving resolution to the architectures of bodily shame through a parallel reading of the invention of the bathing suit and its dockland water yards, rendering the naked body as an obscenity. This was later undermined by Victorian bathing etiquette, such as the bathing machine of the 18th century, understood as a unit, and its genital urbanism, which started to structure the coastline of Borkum. The chapter finds its conclusion by reflecting on the boat, the dockland, and the bathing machine, three infrastructures which mediate the soft human body through architecture and its wider territory, by using Berlin and Brandenburg as a stage to introduce four distinct architectural types. Crystal 1 and 2 are part of a network of architectures, which is placed around the orbital highway which connects Berlin to its wider territory, Brandenburg, and uses their appearance as last islands of communal restroom culture in service of its 350,000 daily commuters through a car wash and a highway shower for truckers, in search of a more reciprocal relationship between the outside and the inside through performative infrastructures, aiming for a transparency which connects the interior with its underlying matrix. Act 2, Seduction Machines. The second act further expands the domestication of water by questioning the way in which society constructed water into good and bad nature. Moreover, good and bad water accelerated the gender distinction in relation to its use. We can find, as portrayed to the left side, men which drained the Brandenburg wetlands, built dams or hydro infrastructures, dressed as Friedrich the Great, and tamed so-called wild bad nature outside of the house, while the then purified, mastered socio-natural product of domesticated water enters into the household. Here, the gender-related domestic labor of maintaining the house became a part of the woman. Act 2 therefore questions the lack of visibility of hydro infrastructures today, which mediate between the wild and the tamed, the supposedly natural and the supposedly domestic, and is in search of hybrid monuments which break this binary distinction. Architectural machines. The first public bath within Germany launched in Hamburg in the year 1855 at the Schweinemarkt, an old workers' district. The circular bathing facility found its protocol of gender-related circulation through its cardinal directions. Women entered through the south, men entered through the north. Only the woman bath allowed to navigate towards the center of the circular type, in which devices for childcare, manual laundry washing, and 28 bathtubs were placed. The male section was distinguished in class 1 tubs out of steel and class 2 tubs out of iron. Moreover, the building itself used evaporating states of water from liquid to steam in order to use its metabolism for cleansing purposes. The two following subchapters explore the domestication of water through the arts and define the bathroom as a conceptual product of exhibitions. Moreover, the historic case studies support this domestication then through an ever-continuing mass production process of sanitary devices, such as Dr. Lasser's Volksbrause, introduced at the 1882 hygiene exhibition in Berlin. Moving forward into sanitary fetishism and Adolf Loos's obsession in regard of the new emerging figure of the plumber and the fabrication of 4 body prosthetics, the tap, the tub, the shower, and the toilet, which started to enter the German household but had no functional room such as the bathroom to be adjacent to. Towards Crystal 3, a eulogy to the water treatment plant. Recapturing the core question of the mediation between the natural and the domestic, the second design, Crystal 3, declares the water treatment plant as a failed opportunity to give due emphasis to domestic architectures and their machining hinterland. This is done in order to deconstruct its artificial metabolism. Public water, Crystal 3. Crystal 3 is a water treatment plant placed in the Oderbruch region. Its performative and open structures contrast the military surveillance mechanisms through which these structures are normally secured. While the plant exposes its cleansing procedure on the ground floor, its upper level is only accessible for one person, the Hausmeister, meaning the janitor. The janitor's chamber is attached to the treatment plant and further accelerates the relation between nature and self-defined culture, spatially manifested by carving a slab into 4 rocks digged out of desertificated agricultural land. The janitor chamber becomes a canvas for new modes of spatial occupation. Last but not least, intimate aliens. The final chapter introduces the reader into the slow emergence of the functional plan which 95% of all Germans occupy today. The prior 4 prosthetics, tap, tub, shower, and toilet, started to enter the Berlin courtyard type household before being confined by a functional dictate. The wet room allowed to change function over time due to the placement of light objects, but forecasted the penetration of the bathroom into the private realm. Progressing from the bathroom of the German Empire to the Third Reich, the Reichsbautypus, which derived from Neufahrt's and Speer's housing strategy for Berlin, casted not only the project of standardized architectures, but further aimed to standardize the body which were using these spaces in the first place. Domesticating desire. Before going one time into the depth of one of the designs, the last case study is the bathroom of the GDR. The WBS70 Plattenbau type is predicative for the genealogy. It shows a completely internalized bath, no windows for ventilation, hidden ducts, vents, and access points, and ultimately forced machines to take over all these functions and create the well-tempered environment, from the isolation to its ventilation to its contained body, while all machines are censored behind walls and underground. A eulogy to hedonism. Crystal 4. Crystal 4 is the last architectural proposition which I will take into more depth. The building is placed next to the Spree in Berlin. It neglects any form of site specificity deriving from its architectural representation, but is dependent from its direct natural conditions, such as the river water and its cardinal directions, in which its spatial layout plays out at its best with the east-west orientation. The slab type is constructed by a 7x7 column grid and cantilevers 2 meters towards the facade. The program is divided into 3 spatial figures and resembles an urban hybrid for dense city structures. Floor 1 to 3 host a public bath before entering into a convoluted mixture of Plan 1, which offers 40 square meters apartments, and Plan 2, which offers 20 square meter cells and a communal kitchen and living room at its head. The building reverse engineers the question of censorship and architectural neglect, in which the visitor of the bath enters the building through the boiler room, while residents can reach the upper levels via staircases and elevators. The entrance is planned as an open lobby, in which gatherings can take place among the machines that serve the bath and the residential levels. The spatial configuration is used to intensify the dramaturgy of rituals, from arrival to undressing to locking up one's clothes, until stopping at an intermediate space in which bathing slippers can be found to the side, while its center offers a drinking fountain. The politics of the interior resolve from a belief that architecture's only goal is to challenge perception of comfort and destroy frameworks that constitute normative habitual relation between occupant and spatial provision. Building and occupant enter into a reciprocal performative relation. Double-sized glazed bricks are used to decensor the idea of a wall. Pipes, ducts, and air vents are manifested as spatial elements. Progressing further, 4 baths are programmed behind each other, which result from the Japanese Saito culture, in which the body is cleansed individually before entering shared waters. The water track towards the east can be interlocked throughout all 4 spaces. Towards the head of the building, the rectangular domestication of water is counterfigured by the organic shapes that result from a tiled flooring, out of which these ponds are sledge-hammered. The facade allows to be opened up completely within the summer period, while encapsulating its climate during the winter time. It does not serve any further programmatic means within this part, and is meant to accelerate and rejuvenate time in relation to occupation. Looking at an extract of the section reveals how the dramaturgy that is searched for on a horizontal surface is further defined in its verticality. Material conditions drawn on scale 1 to 5 give information on finishes, structure, and ducting. To increase light conditioned, a double glazed brick flooring is spanned vertically between 2 IPE beams. Normative gaze patterns are reversed. Within the finished sauna, smoke and vapor mediate literal control of visibility between individual nakedness and collective gathering. The dwelling units expose the ducting to the outside walls. The glazed brick separation walls are supported by a 1.20 meter high concrete slab. We're now looking at an extract of floor plan 1 in which the 20 square meters apartment are placed. On the residential floors, the outer facade of the building is meant to resemble a porosity that is not exclusive to one's skin. Water taps can be found adjacent to the moldings of the facade that allow gray water, which comes from the gutter, to be used throughout the building. The apartments are part of a thermodynamic system in which floor heating is activated due to the occupation of the bath and uses its waste heat residue in order to temper certain parts of the dwelling. The heat within these zones is conceived by PVC curtains, while all furnishings and objects stand on wheels and therefore allow a multi-flexible layout of different constellations. The circulation spaces that are framed by the vertical access points, which offer communal infrastructures. Floor plan 2 on the residential type counterposes the slab type with an open plan in its center. The head of the building is a communal arrival point and hosts as a laundrette. Rather than censoring kitchen, bathroom, living room, and bedroom through walls, 4 plateaus on different heights mark zones that can be occupied in multiple ways throughout time due to light objects. 2 freshwater pipes accelerate the spatial flexibility by not screwing a tap into a wall, but by extending a pipe via a water hose which can serve its function where needed into the room. The spatial manifestation enforces a constant renegotiation between spatial need and temporal desire. Intimacy, currently shrunken to the last body parts not seen inside of a Zoom call, is offered back to the occupant as the highest good of our times. The occupant decides what to see and what not. 4 aluminum pipes form a continuous sculpture, interconnecting all rooms. There is no outside and there is no inside. Space and bodies dissolve. Thank you.
All right. Who wants to start?
Hey, Thomas.
May I?
Yeah, Ilya, go ahead.
I mean, this is obviously a précis, perhaps a little bit too condensed. It could do with allowing more from what is presumably a much bigger thesis. I mean, to me, this is an example of what could be a paradigm of what a thesis ought to be. You know, from the point of view of its methodology, right down to the synthesis of the research at the end, and at the same time, it is. I think it's one cannot not avoid not noticing that the kind of pervading sense of humor that goes across with them, that kind of prevails right across the thesis from on this domestication of water, from the bathroom as a liminal space to Baudrillard's modern narcissist, to the eulogy of the car wash, the sanitary citizen, the DDR bathroom. I mean, and the number of provocative and politically non-correct statements, non-politically correct statements. I think that ending up in a very sophisticated design makes altogether for an immense pleasure in following this, what is almost as an entertainment, but what is a very, very serious, thesis on the topic chosen, which is the domestication of water. I cannot do anything else but congratulate you, but also stress that, I don't know, I hope, Platon, that you're recording all this, because this is a paradigm that I think candidates for future theses, for future things should be aware of and should study. I mean, it should exist in the kind of a library of at the AA. Basically, thank you, congratulations. That's all I have to say to start the discussion.
Thank you so much for these words. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
I completely agree with Elias Zengelis, because I think your thesis is very good and it's extremely sound, both in terms of theory, of drawings, of practice. Everything is actually really well developed and really well described. So I really have to congratulate with you. Moreover, I'm doing now at the Venice Biennale a project on toilets. So to me, it's extremely exciting to see this project, which is somehow connected to what I'm doing together with my other colleagues. So I would be very happy to be in touch with you also. And maybe I can also suggest you a couple of conferences they are organizing now around toilets in which you could participate and maybe contribute with this thesis, you know. So please send me an email at my AA account so that we can be in touch. I think your thesis is very important, both because it's contemporary, but it's still well grounded in terms of history, and it's also very well designed. So I think it's something you should continue and you should use as a future research somehow. So I have no negative comments and no questions. I just comments.
Thank you. I will write you an email for sure. Thanks a lot. And super nice project. I checked it out yesterday.
Thank you.
I can follow. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Christy.
Go on, Lawrence.
Well, look, Darian, the drawing is I think something that I enjoy even more than your account of it. I really appreciate the beauty of what you've shown. But partly because I love the beauty of it. You know, I kind of want to take this in a different direction. Everybody's going to congratulate you on all of this because it is such a tour de force. But let's say for a moment that the theories are wrong. You know, let's imagine that possibly there is still a dispute that one might have in relation to the various accounts of our domestication, of our modernity, of the sanitary world. In a way, how would we use your projective reasoning to call into question various theories? Now, that I think is where, for me, it would become even more interesting, because in some ways it's as though you're using the drawings as a partner in a kind of a sort of a discourse of a transgression. You know, that you're sort of saying, you know, well, there's the dialectic of good and bad, but I'm going to transgress that. And so in a way, if we ask how those discourses kind of work, they work in a certain sense to reaffirm the importance of, you know, the subject who provides meaning. But working in this more projective way, let's say going through Berlin together, going through Berlin in a future city, we're imagining that there will be a different way of life. And this different way of life isn't thought about in terms of meaning, right, or communication. This different way of life is actually something that's much more pragmatic. And there's a different way in which people might come together, celebrate bathing, celebrate other kinds of activities associated with water. And I guess in a way, what I would love to see is a stronger account of the way in which the new approach to water actually transforms interpersonal relationships and new practices, encourages new practices. And that's what I'd really love to see come out of this. Less than a reiteration of the theories. And you know, clearly you have a mastery over them. And you know, so I'm not in any sense trying to call into question the way in which you've approached that material. It's great. But I almost think that as an architect and as someone with vision in the way that you have, the real prize would be in a more speculative sort of account of how this might change the way in which we engage with one another.
I forgot to ask a very quick question. In which part of the spray do you put the building?
In which part of the book I put, sorry?
Of the spray, of the spray.
Of the spread of the book.
The spray, the river.
Part of the spray, I
The
understand.
river.
Yes.
Which part of the river? Yeah.
It's next to Eisenbrücke. I don't know if you know it. It's basically 50 minutes towards the east with bike from the parliament.
So it's what used to be the East Berlin.
Yes,
Yeah.
it sits more or less exactly on the trajectory.
Not close to Moabit-Werder. No,
Exactly.
Is it close to Moabit-Werder?
Yes, Moabit is.
Yes, I know. Okay, I know. So it's where the wall was actually. It's exactly where the wall was. Off Moabit-Werder was Moabit-Werder was in west, and then the wall, and then Mitte was in the east. Yeah, I've done a project on that side. Okay.
I can also follow up. I think, I'm just going to chime in here, and it was a real pleasure to follow the project. And it is absolutely a mastery of a thesis. I think I have very specific points I want to touch on, because I think overall you are very much in control of what you're talking about. I think there's, for me, there's one question, which is, you kind of lightly touched upon it, and I think it would be quite nice to think about more in terms of the body itself as you deal with it, which is, I think still, although you do mention that there's kind of water that comes through it, I think it's still a little bit treated as an object. And I think what's amazing about thinking about water as an element to work with is that it's one that transgresses borders of bodies. It's one where bodies can exist within water, and water exists within bodies, as it's at least 60% of our consistency, right? And I think to really shift scales in a way, and to think of flows of water also from that perspective, also following perhaps, I don't know if this is part of your references, but one of my favorite theoretical authors, Astrid Neymanis, is writing about hydrofeminism and this book, Bodies of Water, and thinking along those lines in terms of what does it mean to follow the traces of waterways, in terms of thinking about what kinds of entities does it connect us with? How do we actually, and I think you're kind of trying to do that with your architectural proposals to a little bit kind of desolidify that absolute border of the built matter, and to think about it more, to kind of try to break away from it. But I think perhaps it's a shift of scale, but perhaps it's a matter of kind of thinking along other entities as well. What watery bodies do we share, and what entities do we share it with? Could it be, for example, the microbes that are in the clouds and fall into the rainwater and become part of the spray? Or could it be fish that we eat and drink from the waters that we shed? What sort of kind of ways that we could rethink about collectivities kind of come through the processes that you describe? And I think all of the theoretical work that you've done, all of the methodological and historical work that you've done within the thesis somehow kind of puts you in a perfect position to be able to kind of let us imagine in that kind of new way of conceptualizing water beyond kind of the control over it, but actually listening into what it tells us, beyond kind of seeing how we've treated it in a kind of modernist way, to see how it kind of responds back as kind of a methodology, as an interscalar vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is part of I think looking at it in this way will also kind of bring out even more what the really beautiful quality of your work is, which is kind of visceral, right? Like it's really gives a texture to the body. And I think it will be able to in fact kind of accentuate that. And that leads me to my final question, which is in fact a question, not a comment like the rest, which is the title, because I think crystal refers to a solid nature of water, right? Like it is maybe this is what you intended, but maybe you could talk a little bit about why the title refuses the fluidity of water and actually refers to something more rigid.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for both questions. I think, I mean, I absolutely agree with the first one, the one on the methodology and where it stops, basically with this line drawing on red surface where water touches a hand is the only interconnection point within the research. And then I stop, which was actually intentional because I always had this wish to not show directly microbes and go into the liver of a human person, but rather try to go onto the material scale of the building that forms basically if your skin shrinkles while you're sitting inside of the tap, sorry, not the tap. And I think that was kind of a way for me to convert a lack of research potentially on a scale, to try to convert that into the design and try to answer it through materiality. And then the second question of crystal and why that's the title, I think because of two messages. I think on the one hand side, yes, the discourse on fluid space is enormous at the moment, right? And dissolving space and everything becomes kind of spaghetti wobbly, but I still believe in architectural as a spatial practice to a far extent that can create walls or has to create walls as sensor, and therefore try to understand this fixed state of water as a potential to rethink the wall as a sensoring element between me and you, and therefore decided to call it rather crystal than ocean or, I don't know, water as a title. And secondly, I also believe that it was quite important for me to somehow, when I ended with the GDR model and this basic fact that an average, the bathroom in Germany is 4.5 square meters big, it became a super functional space. So giving it a title that kind of pushes in a direction that enforces a bit more of luxury in potential was also a second notion that gave me the feeling that it's a better, or it's a good title to go ahead with.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I completely respect that as a choice. I just think that, you know, that at that last part, you're kind of becoming an engineer again, and you're kind of resisting within an architecture, although it is radical in terms of making a space wet, which is the one thing you're not supposed to do within a building, right? To actually allow wetness and to kind of bring out the hose within the living space. But I think at the same time, you're kind of like returning to something that is quite traditional, not traditional, traditional in the sense of there is, as you say, there are walls, there are elements, there's a bed, there's a bathroom, etc., etc. And I respect that as kind of a design, as a choice, as a design choice. I just think that the thesis part also has the potentials of more speculative endings. And I would actually encourage you to go towards that. Maybe, you know, after you've graduated from this course and you have the design as well, but exploring where that takes you, which doesn't necessarily have to be something that kind of tunes into your engineering side, but is more maybe philosophical, is more kind of politically poignant. It's more liberal in its form. I think it just has a series of endings that it could end to, and that's one of them, and that's great. But I would be really excited to see the others.
Absolutely, I will check it out. Thank you.
I mean, there's not much to add really to this. Of course, it has been very, very entertaining to follow. You're a great presenter, and the piece of research and work you have done is highly imaginative, I would say, very has depth, has multi-layers. So it's more and more like it gives us small surprises, and this element of surprise is always very entertaining. So well done, congratulations. I think this is this is a piece of work that could be published, and I would like to see it published with the more it matures, it definitely worth it. There are not many things I could say. Only one thing that I had in mind was about the notion of domesticity and how you approach it through particularly the design and the speculativeness of it. Although I do enjoy all the references and everything, don't get me wrong, is that at the end, Crystal 4 really focuses on the domesticity as within its boundaries, and choosing to put Crystal 4 in Spree, alongside Spree, in the middle of Berlin. I wonder what is the connection with the city, and whether we can talk in 21st century about a non-diffuse domesticity, that it is confined within, even if these boundaries are airy, whatever, and open or whatever, can we still talk about a non-diffuse domesticity? And it made me wonder if you would kind of spread Crystal 4 in a city, what would that mean? What would that mean for the bodies, or what would that mean for the collectives, for the water traces, or for the kind of water-based infrastructure full over the city? What would be even finding this tab, every now and then in parts of the city, and where you would tap into that? Well, what would it mean if you could hack the system, the water system of the city, and plug in that domesticity, not only in rivers, but in other sides of the city? So I think that connection with the urban and understanding domesticity, not something as very private, very personal, very confined, very individual, but actually something very diffuse and urban, might be something that you can think of, perhaps not for this week, perhaps for later, but it just one thing that got in my mind. But overall, really, really congratulations, well done.
Thank you so much. If I can just react to what you were saying, I think in my mind, it was always important to use Crystal 4, which is of course like 1 out of 4 different designs, which try to spread it from domesticity to the machines to all these intersecting points, to multiple layers. I think what was so important for me to not cluster Berlin full with Crystal 4s is that it tries to be a very specific stress release point at a very specific urban area where different conditions of the city collide, right? And therefore centering interactive and collective ways of relating water to a community or to a group of people became important to me. And I chose domesticity, or the domestic project, to put that forward today for the presentation, because I believe it has the greatest chance to actually question contemporary living conditions. And I think the question of the contemporary was like a constant question. The reason why I used pop cultural aesthetics in order to think about these architectures was like, how can people in Chadi's age, who are like 20 and like have like an enormous time period of living ahead of them, like how can they occupy space in different manners than I do in this attic? No, like that was the core ambition. Shadi, sorry for using Shadi as an example. But yeah, if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Although I was trying to hint at something slightly different. But one thing that actually you made me think again was about the water and water bodies, as for example, that would be Spree, right? Do have laws of their own. And there is a big ownership also kind of level there, and regulatory and so on. And I think in terms of just being speculative and actually trying what would crystal 4 mean in other types of regulatory landscapes, water landscapes. That is what, like, don't think of just multiplying in everywhere, you know, but what would that mean if you would try to diffuse that domesticity in international waters in Mediterranean, when suddenly domesticity and citizenship and identity of bodies and whatever would be, and how would be that scale different, you know? Or would it be in another kind of scale, much more confined, you know? What I mean is that it is something that should somehow be in dialogue with the context that it is, and in a way have manifest some sort of you know, as you said, like, if either when we go that, when you talk back to water being object of self, you know, reflecting the reality of the context that wants to critique but also challenge but also integrate and so on, almost like a mirror to the context.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other comments for Darian's work from anyone? No? All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. This was an incredible morning. And as I said at the beginning, we are incredibly proud for all 5 students. This was a really, really difficult year for 2 years, basically, for everyone. I just want to give the opportunity to our jurors to say some, you know, conclusionary remarks if they want. So please, if you want to say something overall about what the work that you've seen, would be really, really lovely and helpful for everyone. Thank you.
Well, Platon, Hamed, thank you very much for the invitation and the chance to see the work. It's really been a pleasure, and I love the kind of combination of diversity of projects and themes on the one hand, but the kind of consistency of approach across the dissertations, the kind of consistent concern with understanding a theoretical and historical background while also pushing the work forward. It's great to see the consistency of a method applied to many different kinds of issues and questions. So thanks very much for actually allowing us to see and participate in that kind of overview. And, you know, I think also, you know, I would love to sit down with the 2 of you and with the students at some point and talk about different ways of organizing dissertations, and what comes out through different modes of organization. That is, you know, does one foreground the synthesis that is there in architecture and then unfold the issues and questions from the architecture, or does one lead with the theory and then produce the architecture as a result? And what are the differences in these kinds of theory, in these kinds of approaches to writing? I think is something that would be really enjoyable to discuss. But anyway, today was a pleasure and gave me lots to think about, not only in terms of organization, but the across the board, the different themes, the problem areas that the students were addressing was really, for me, very fruitful.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you so much.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for the invite. For me, it was really a pleasure, especially because I felt that all the theses were very ambitious and somehow had very good intentions, also for students in their own countries and in their own contexts, which is normally not the case. You always get excited by the exotic and not by your own reality, no? So I think it's a sign. Second, I feel that all these theses are leading to a lot of questions and could lead to many other theses. And somehow I see in all of them a continuation into another thesis, into a PhD, into a project, into an architectural project. So I feel that they are well settled and they were structured, so well structured that could be continued, and like this thesis could be a very good base for a future project. So this is to me the most important thing I saw. So congratulations to all, because I feel you did, all of you, a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda. That's a very important point. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to add. I'd like to add to these comments with which I absolutely agree, 100% agree, and that just a small point that as a footnote, that together with their kind of theoretical commitment and seriousness, they all had a kind of maintained, and especially the last one, but all of them, they all maintained an architectural instrumentality, and somehow it was not left behind.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Ilya. That's very important as well.
Also, from my side, it was a real pleasure to see. And I think I don't know if it's the duration of the study or the methods that were suggested by the program. I think something about the design of the program really works here in terms of all projects were very much in depth, very well covered, very well considered, and also kind of questioning, really asking the important questions in terms of the ways that architectures are kind of helping us rethink really fundamental questions about the way we live together in cities. And so I think there's a political project that's kind of underlying through all of this. And I'm really excited to see that all of you have kind of considered it and have kind of formulated in a really beautiful way. That I guess I'm very hopeful to see that, you know, maybe this is what the next generation of architects will be doing, and that gives me hope for the whole practice, which I didn't have much of. So thank you for reinstating that hope, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
After that optimistic note from Christina, perhaps I can say again, thank you very much for the invitation, of course, Platon and Hamid. But and again, it's a great diversity, depth, rigor, consistency in rigor. And so I think this it is a congratulation and a great achievement that should go both for the students, the tutors, as well as all the people that are behind and support of this kind of process. And I have to say that this has been particularly more impressive if we consider the confinement and the COVID and all that challenges that it has imposed on teaching and learning and education through the last more than a year now. And I think the fact that you have managed to have this result under these circumstances and still demonstrate almost a collectivity between you and a collectivity, and also kind of, you know, I could feel this kind of support with each other, but also producing this kind of results and sustaining remotely this kind of level. I think it's remarkable, and you should all be very, very proud of you have achieved. So well done, everyone. And again, it has been a pleasure and honor to be part of this and be able to see all these outcomes. So well done. And good luck for the submission next week.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I just want to say one last thing. For us, it's very important how we work together and the kind of culture that the studio and the program has. And I think we try to teach in a very horizontal way. So it's a collective project as much as it is a teaching and learning experience. So I take this opportunity to say, you know, thank you to Hamid Khosravi, Cristina Gamboa, Dorni Bernath, Raul Avilla, Ruz Belia Sazar, and Ioana Piñara. for amazing work that they put together in the last 2 years. And you know, this program is them as much as it is our students, right? Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So we have a product placement, Hamed, just to inform everyone that there's an exhibition at the AA that you should visit, that Hamed has curated tonight. So please join us on Instagram and online, and you can also book and come. We're going to be at the AA soon in a few hours. So if you are in London, join us. All right. Thank you so much.
We can come.
Are you going to be able to visit physically?
Cannot hear you.
Huh?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, with appointment, but also after 21st of June, it will be totally public, so anybody can enter.
But you have to keep distances, etc., whatever.
After 21st of June, I guess not, but now is 10 people in the AA gallery per hour.
Okay, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. I mean, every minute we are remembering you, Ilya.
Thank you.
All those amazing work. So congratulations to you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you, Platon.
Φιλιά πολλά.
Να τα πούμε για τηλέφωνο, έτσι.
Ναι, πάρε με, βεβαίως. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, bye.
Bye, everyone.